Chapter 141. Did we talk about anything? After the dinner, everyone escorted Satina out. Dozens of guests asked for photos and autographs. Even Minister Fudge invited her to his home as a guest. As they watched her leave, the talk around the gardens turned to the recent upheavals. When did that fat man get so brave? Someone muttered. Maybe what happened a few days ago made him bold, Malfoy sneered. The British Aurors covert operation had dealt a devastating blow to international poaching rings. Rumor had it that Dumbledore was still traveling, while the American Magical Congress had stepped up its pressure on underground networks. Many dark wizards and smugglers were fleeing into France's magical black markets, where suddenly rare and valuable items seemed to appear out of nowhere. School's starting soon. Do you think Dumbledore will be back? Another asked. I don't know. Why don't you go ask Snape? Someone replied. The short-haired wizard glanced around, met Snape's cold stare, and immediately backed away. Snape surveyed the remaining guests with that same icy calm, stepped into a fireplace, and was gone, returned to Hogwarts. When most of the crowd had dispersed, Rogue invited Lucius to the balcony garden to talk. Lucius lifted a glass of plain boiled water, a drink he didn't understand anyone enjoying, and said, "Business has been good for you lately, hasn't it?" "Not really," Lucius replied. "Everyone's panicking because of the ministry. The price of magical materials has shot up so much it looks like you're the only one making a profit." Rogue watched him carefully. "It isn't a long-term thing. What happened in New York? Why did two ministries coordinate a joint operation? Where is Dumbledore? The term starts soon." "I don't know. I expect the headmaster will be at the sorting ceremony on time," Rogue said. Lucius laughed. He could tell Rogue was only answering part of the truth. This boy always left things unsaid. "How's that new Muggle Protection Act coming along?" Rogue asked Malfoy, who had been lingering nearby. "It's being enforced," Malfoy said. "The Aurors are busy going after poachers, so routine searches have been delayed." Malfoy worried. His manor still contained dark artifacts he couldn't easily dispose of. "Delayed? I heard the Aurors at the Ministry were going to hunt down items left by Lord Voldemort." "Vol." Lucius stopped himself, eyes cutting to Rogue. "You shouldn't say his name." The mention of you-know-who made Lucius uneasy. His memory of that reign still frightened him. "Maybe," Rogue said, inspecting Lucius's reaction. When Lucius instinctively tightened his grip on the glass, Rogue smiled faintly. "Worried about your family's cache of artifacts? Don't be. They don't have the manpower right now." Lucius's expression didn't relax. "The law is there like a knife," he said. "Even if it's aimed elsewhere for now, it can be turned on us." "It's late to change what's been done," Lucius admitted, though he couldn't help a small, bitter satisfaction. The Travis family's operations were suddenly bringing in thousands of galleons every day, an edge that made him resentful. If the ministry eventually cracked down on objects tied to you-know-who, his family would face that sweep too. "We still have options," Rogue said. "You're talking about overturning the Muggle Protection Act?" Lucius sounded incredulous. "With Dumbledore around, no one could undo that." Rogue only smiled. "Wouldn't it be better to have it enforced properly then? If items that could alert Muggles are banned, then logically, clothes, books, teapots, everything could fall under that scope." "Cauldrons would have to stay," Malfoy protested faintly. "And brooms. Muggles don't use those anymore, but you can't ban everything." "Tell that to the letter of the law," Rogue said. "Laws only make sense when applied in full. Partial enforcement is just a way to bully the honest." "You want the ministry to withdraw the amendment?" Lucius asked, incredulous. Rogue shrugged. "I'm going to Hogwarts. How could I possibly know what's happening beyond the school gates?" Lucius frowned, but the idea had lodged in his mind. "You could try Leaky Cauldron and Diagon Alley," he said finally. "If anyone can make trouble in public opinion, it's there." Rogue looked up at him, and for a heartbeat, Lucius thought the boy had something planned. Then the elder man picked up his silver snake cane and with a small bow left Travis Manor. Most guests had gone, but Barbara's family would remain for a couple more days. Rogue stayed to show Fleur and her sister around the manor. In the private library, Fleur wandered between shelves, admiring the grandeur. "Rogue," she said, eyes bright, "with Dumbledore as headmaster, your magic must be very strong." Rogue waved off the compliment. "It's nothing special. We just don't teach the dark arts. Fleur blinked. Why not? If wizards never learn the dark arts, what do they do when they must face things like Death Eaters? Professor Dumbledore prefers defensive magic, Rogue explained. We learn charms and counter curses. Protego forms shields. We study dueling tactics and spells like Stupefy and Expelliarmus to incapacitate opponents. At Botons, we don't teach unforgivable curses either, but we don't forbid studying the dark arts, Fleur said. And Durmstrang, well, they pride themselves on offensive magic. Perhaps the headmaster thinks students can be strong without embracing cruelty, Rogue said. Fleur snorted. She clearly found Hogwarts' gentler approach naive. Rogue caught her look and grinned. Shall we duel then? Fleur laughed in surprise. You and me. You're only first year. You can't hurt me. If I don't even bruise you, don't go crying to your mother later, Rogue warned playfully. She accepted. The two bowed and stepped back. On 3 they cast. Defindo, Fleur cried. Protego, Rogue countered. Fleur stared as a golden shield flared into being around Rogue and her cutting charm shattered harmlessly. She scowled. Rogue's smile only irked her more. I'm going to use the dark arts, she hissed, half joking, half daring. Please, Rogue said, still smiling. Fleur tightened her grip and shouted, Stupefy! The spell slammed into the shield, sending ripples through it, but the boy inside was unhurt. Frustrated, she poured more power into her wand, launching stronger hexes, and even a bone-jarring curse she wouldn't normally use in a friendly duel. If it had been a real battle, she admitted to herself, she might have been tempted to cast something far worse. That's not just a shield charm, she panted after 10 minutes, lowering her wand and finally conceding. All right, I admit it. Hogwarts' method works. Rogue offered a modest grin. You're excellent too, Fleur. If any other student from my school sparred with you, they probably wouldn't last 2 rounds. Really? Fleur blinked, surprised. Of course. If you were at our school, you'd be one of the strongest prefects in any house. You might even be head girl. Fleur's cheeks flushed at the praise, and she couldn't hide the pleased smile that followed. Chapter 142, Comprehensive Law Enforcement. However, facing a genius wizard like me, I'm sorry, but even if I'm only a first year, there's nothing you can do. Humph. Fleur glared at him. If the Triwizard Cup hadn't been cancelled, I would have shown you that a duel is nothing like real combat. Fleur led her sister away from the library, fury still simmering. She held a deep grudge against that distant relative. Meanwhile, the Muggle Protection Act was being rolled out across Diagon Alley. Aurors, acting under the new law, searched everywhere for anything that might confuse Muggles. Teacups that could brew themselves were confiscated, books that bit were taken away, enchanted cameras that resembled Muggle devices were seized. The Aurors' strict enforcement sparked a wave of outrage. They continued daily inspections in Diagon Alley under mounting pressure. Madame Malkin's scissors and rulers were gone. The rogue's shop had been shuttered. Diagon Alley felt deserted, and for a while, everyone lived in a state of fear. Jessica did not tell Rogue about these developments. She simply saw him onto the train and told him to stay safe at school. As tensions grew, magical publications, led by the Daily Prophet, began to attack Fudge and the Ministry of Magic. Many shops went on strike, calls for Fudge's resignation grew louder, and people marched the streets carrying items that Muggles would never mistake. Skulls, ghouls. Diagon Alley turned into a bizarre Halloween parade, monsters and oddities on display. To counter the Daily Prophet's claims, Dolores arranged a meeting with Rita for coffee. Oh, dear John, how could you be so careless? Rita adjusted her glasses and picked up the internal document Dolores had left on the table. The next morning, a new exposé ran. The whole process of the Muggle Protection Act, from proposal to implementation, was laid out for everyone. The story revealed that Arthur had proposed the amendment and Director Amelia had supported its passage. The blame shifted away from Fudge, giving the minister some breathing room. Fudge summoned both Arthur and Amelia to his office. Who leaked this? He demanded, slamming his hand on the desk. Look at today's paper. This draft came from inside your department. Amelia picked up the newspaper and turned it toward Arthur. He shook his head emphatically. He swore he had not leaked anything. Dolores stood behind Fudge, a faint, unreadable smile at the corner of his mouth. Minister, we need to launch a leak investigation, he said. Investigation? Fudge waved his hand. The problem now isn't an investigation. The new Muggle Protection Act hasn't won the support of the wizarding community. Arthur tried to defend himself. The amendment I submitted was meant to crack down on dark arts items. So you're saying we Aurors were wrong in our enforcement? Dolores sneered. I said from the start the scope of this amendment was too broad. Once passed, it would disrupt the entire magical world. But what did you say? Protecting Muggles and preventing the discovery of magic is the purpose, Arthur shot back. Now we enforce the law, and when problems happen, you blame the Aurors? Dolores looked at Fudge. Minister, if enforcement was mishandled, I'll take responsibility. Dolores, Fudge barked, slapping the table to silence him. If there's a problem, just resign. Do you have any sense of responsibility? Do you realize how hard it is to train a senior Auror? Amelia listened, increasingly uneasy about the way the Aurors had conducted searches in Diagon Alley. Seeing how Dolores and Fudge were aligned, she understood where the blame was really being steered. Minister, Dolores did not act improperly. The Auror's actions show that the amendment itself has flaws. She changed her tone. Arthur's face tightened. Was he about to be sacrificed? For the sake of the ministry's authority, we cannot simply repeal the law, Amelia continued, slapping the original draft down on the desk. You signed this when it passed. If the legal department's draft could be leaked, the final version could be exposed too. Fudge glanced at the black and white text, and his expression softened. Amelia, do you have any ideas? We should invite the Wizards of Diagon Alley to tea and hear their opinions, she said. We'll collect feedback and have Arthur draft a revised amendment. Amelia smiled slightly. Dolores still had some years to rise through the ranks. As for the leak, a formal investigation must be launched. They all agreed at once. And of course, the tea will be your responsibility. Fudge nodded. Amelia's plan had merit. In response, Jessica organized the Wizarding World's first Chamber of Commerce. She was nominated president, and Mr. Ollivander agreed to be vice president. He had at first wanted to decline, but the Ollivanders' inexpensive wands, once sold at nearly a loss, had benefited countless wizards, so he accepted the post and accompanied Jessica to the ministry. They brought together the community's concerns and sat down with Amelia to discuss the Muggle Protection Act. Arthur, the amendment's drafter, sat nearby like a secretary, taking notes. Everyone's stance was straightforward. Prohibiting dark arts objects was reasonable. But beyond dark arts artifacts, there were countless benign items that could confuse Muggles. Were wizards expected to live like hermits just to keep Muggles safe? The tea party began tense, but as discussion deepened, it grew livelier. By the end, both sides were laughing. The ministry agreed to draft a revised amendment incorporating the community's feedback and to return all previously confiscated items. Suddenly, Dolores burst into the room with a report. Director, there's an urgent matter. He glanced at Arthur, a smile that was hard to read on his face. Amelia felt faint as she read the first lines and steadied herself against the table. She covered the paper and forced a smile. Miss Jessica, Mr. Ollivander, the ministry will release a preliminary draft as soon as possible. We'll invite you to review it. After seeing them out, she turned to Dolores. Is this true? London has received multiple reports of Muggles witnessing a mysterious car, Dolores said. I've already sent people to investigate. The minister hasn't been informed yet. Arthur's heart dropped when he heard mysterious car. He looked at Amelia and Dolores, fear in his eyes that the report implicated him. I understand. Thank you, Dolores. Amelia sighed deeply. She had fought Fudge for the authority to handle these matters and had even protected Arthur, only to feel betrayed now. It was infuriating. An official who helped draft the Muggle Protection Act, having a Muggle car at home, and having modified it magically would have been a private matter in the past. But now, after full enforcement in Diagon Alley, for his own son to be seen flying a modified Muggle car through Muggle London, well, that was a scandal. Arthur, you've been working too hard. Go home and rest, Amelia said, picking up the report. She needed to brief the minister herself. Arthur tried to speak. Director, I want to. But Amelia had already left the room. Dolores patted Arthur on the shoulder with an oddly sympathetic air. Alas, your son drove a car from London to Hogwarts, he said quietly. Your flying car was seen by Muggles. Chapter 143, Badges and Howler Letters. The new school year began, and Hogwarts welcomed another crop of first years. Among them were the eccentric Luna Lovegood, Harry's little admirer Colin Creevey, and the youngest Weasley, Ginny. Harry and Ron had not yet arrived, and Professor Snape had also left his place, vanishing somewhere off the dais. "Snape, where's the headmaster?" one student whispered. "Yeah, it's the sorting ceremony today," another answered. "Do you think the headmaster didn't get the Defense Against the Dark Arts job and quit?" someone else joked. "Shame. My favorite part is watching the headmaster take points from Gryffindor." "Quiet," Snape warned. The sorting hat was about to be placed on heads. Nobody knew where Dumbledore had gone. When he finally returned, he was dressed unlike his usual magnificent robes. He wore a plain gray robe and had left his half-moon spectacles off. His beard looked longer, and there was an odd, indistinct quality about him. He felt present, and yet somehow remote. The students noticed and whispered, had the headmaster become stronger in some new way? Professor McGonagall presided over the sorting as usual. The new students waited with a mixture of excitement and nervousness as the battered old hat was dropped onto their heads. "You mean my unlovable sister starts next year too?" Daphne complained to Snape after a sorting, sulking. "Oh? Then you'll get to boss her around. Why aren't you pleased?" "Humph, she's always bullied me," Daphne grumbled. "Really? She's been frail since she was small. I always have to let her have her way. Can't magic fix that?" "It's because of magic," Daphne snapped, unwilling to explain further. The sorting finished quickly, and the headmaster and Professor McGonagall left the banquet in haste. In Snape's office, meanwhile, Harry and Ron were being scolded for their late arrival. Down in the Great Hall, the welcome feast had already begun. Dumbledore had given a brief speech and then departed with McGonagall. "Hey, Bowman, how's life at Hogwarts?" Snape called as a ghost drifted by. "Humph, just fine," the ghost replied with the same sullen pride Snape had come to recognize. "I am not anyone's house ghost," the apparition declared when Snape pointed toward the Bloody Baron. "Let me properly introduce myself. I am Bowman Wright, professor of senior alchemy here at Hogwarts." "Isn't there already a ghost teaching?" Marcus exclaimed in surprise. "Good heavens, another ghost besides Professor Binns. I'm a professor, not an assistant," Bowman snapped, fixing Marcus with a glare. "I'll be watching you. Behave in my class, or I'll deduct points." Before Snape could respond, the ghost darted into the wall and vanished. Snape had wanted to ask about the Philosopher's Stone and the blood curse, but Bowman slipped away too quickly. After the feast, Snape made his way alone to the secret classroom on the 4th floor, hidden behind a large clock. As Snape had been told, setting the grandfather clock to the right time revealed the entrance. "Lumos," he muttered, and his wand lit the dusty room. It was scattered with odd equipment, crooked rows of old desks, textbooks left on benches, a corner cupboard filled with peculiarly colored vials of fluorescent liquid. Snape picked up a shattered crystal ball and the broken remains of a divination scale. Strange metal instruments and a few iron basins full of coal ash completed the clutter. It took him a long time to sweep and tidy the space. "The club will start tomorrow," Snape thought. "We need a memorable opening." He imagined practicing in the Forbidden Forest. There were plenty of Aragog and his brood for target practice. If any blind Aragog wanted to survive, they'd better behave. At breakfast, Draco Malfoy burst into laughter as he waved a copy of the Daily Prophet. "Did you hear? Arthur Weasley's been suspended indefinitely by the Ministry." "What? What happened?" several students asked. Malfoy read aloud with relish. "Ford Anglia can fly." He went on, publicly shaming Ron and Harry. The article described how Arthur's actions, helping his son and a friend after the incident with the flying car, had landed him in trouble. An inquiry had been opened and had already turned into a suspension. If things worsened, he could face expulsion or prosecution. Harry and Ron lowered their heads, painfully aware of the trouble they'd caused. It wasn't completely their fault. There had been the platform problem at King's Cross, but the consequences were real. "Enough, Malfoy," Snape said mildly, waving him down. From his robes he produced a small box. Inside were exquisite Ravenclaw Society badges, crafted from precious metal, elegant and tasteful. The glitter drew envious looks from the surrounding students. "Snape, are those Ravenclaw badges?" Malfoy reached out too quickly, and Snape slapped his hand away. Students who meet the requirements to join the Ravenclaw Magical Society may assemble in the Great Hall after dinner. I'll escort everyone to the club room, Snape announced. A sudden commotion interrupted him. The Weasley family owl, Errol, wobbled in and then toppled into a serving dish, clutching a damp red envelope in his beak. "Oh no," someone cried. "Is that for Ron?" Parvati Patil helped Ron pick up the soggy envelope. Ron and Neville recoiled as if it might be contagious. The letter looked worse than dragonpox. With a groan, Ron opened it. Mrs. Weasley's howler exploded across the Great Hall. "You stole the car. I'd not be surprised if the school expelled you. Your father's been suspended, and it's your fault. If you step out of line again, I will fetch you home myself." Mrs. Weasley's voice was louder than usual, so loud that plates trembled. Faces turned to stare at Ron as the howler finished with a dramatic bang and burst into confetti. Ron sat beet red and utterly humiliated. Harry, beside him, felt a stab of worry every time the howler drew breath, half expecting his own name to be mentioned, but Mrs. Weasley never said it. Around them, the hall buzzed with muffled laughter that slowly grew into outright amusement. Those nearby rubbed their ears and returned to their meals, still snickering. Harry's guilt was heavy. Mr. Weasley had been suspended for reviewing, and the ministry wouldn't be reimbursing him. If there had been more children at home, the financial strain would have been worse. "Come on, it's time for class," Snape said with a thin smile. He hadn't been involved in Arthur Weasley's predicament. He'd only mentioned something that gave Malfoy's relations an idea. For matters to reach this point, a fair part of the blame lay with those who acted. He thought briefly of Dobby, the house elf who had betrayed Malfoy, and smiled inwardly. This school year promised to be interesting. Lockhart seemed to be everywhere at once, even in the greenhouses. He stood beside Professor Sprout, immaculate and grinning, asking questions in a voice far too bright for the damp, earthy room. "Oh, hello. I'm your new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Lockhart," he announced, oblivious to the look of barely concealed fury on Sprout's face. "I was just teaching them how to treat the humping willow." "All right, students, let's go to the third greenhouse." Professor Sprout clapped her hands, sending mud splattering. Lockhart jumped and a few pupils laughed. The third greenhouse? A ripple of excitement went through the class. The plants there were more dangerous and far more interesting. Lockhart, however, either didn't hear Sprout's dismissal or chose to ignore it. Shamelessly, he shoved forward and grabbed Harry by the arm. "Professor, you don't mind if I borrow him for 2 minutes, do you?" Under Professor Sprout's concerned stare, Lockhart led Harry away. Rogge watched him go with open disapproval. What on earth had Dumbledore said to allow a man like that to teach here? Lockhart belonged in a classroom preaching grammar and rhetoric, or perhaps a class on obliviating embarrassing memories, given how much he promoted himself. Professor Sprout cleared her throat and turned to the students. "This year we're going to learn about mandrakes. Does anyone know anything about them?" Hermione, predictably, puffed up and raised her hand before anyone else. "Hearing a mandrake's cry will kill a person," she said, entirely unhesitating. "Absolutely correct." Sprout rewarded her answer with 20 points. The others barely reacted. Since the House Cup last year, most of the students didn't care about points so much. They suspected Dumbledore would award them as he pleased anyway. If Gryffindor and Harry were meant to win, they might as well hand them the cup now and skip the end-of-year ceremony. Over 100 little pots lined the benches, each holding a green-purple mandrake seedling. They weren't mature yet. Their cries, if heard at all, were only faint enough to make someone dizzy. If a seedling was pulled up now without earmuffs, at worst a student would faint for a few hours. Still, Professor Sprout went down the line with a crate of earmuffs. The school's budget had clearly been stretched. Even the earmuffs looked shabby. Hands darted for the worst of them. No one wanted to be stuck with the pink one and be laughed at for a term. In the end, Sprout herself put on the pink earmuffs with her usual lack of vanity, which made her look rather endearing with her plain robes and the ridiculous doll over her ears. "Rogge?" Daphne called across the bench once they had their earmuffs in place. Her voice came out garbled and absurd through the muffler. "You're a big idiot, a big dummy who picks his nose." She gave him a friendly theatrical punch on the shoulder. then collapsed into giggles when he merely shrugged and nodded as if she were speaking plainly. On Sprout's cue, they began. Wicked little writhing root forms were extracted from their pots and held up. When a seedling was pulled, it let out a miserable high wail that reverberated through the glasshouse. Had Sprout not shown them a demonstration first, some students might have flung them back into the soil. Rogge didn't hesitate. He replanted his mandrake at once, packing the pot with rich soil mixed with dragon dung. Crops flourish under proper fertilizer, he remarked as he smoothed the earth. Daphne recoiled. Dragon dung? Gross. She had lived a sheltered life. The idea of touching manure made her twitch. Don't make fun of it, Rogge said. If you meet a dark wizard, a mandrake will at least make them faint. You might not even need your wand. Who would bother using one in a duel? Daphne sniffed. She pictured hauling a pot into a fight and being the one to stumble faintingly into combat from the mandrake's cry. These seedlings would need several more repottings to mature. By then, they'd be second years. Rogge sighed. If the threat was petrification, why not buy mature mandrakes from outside? Were they really supposed to wait? If Tom Riddle's diary, if that kind of secret, represented a danger Dumbledore didn't know about, letting the students wait for plants to mature felt reckless. Not everyone had the luck of seeing a basilisk's eyes through a reflection. During lunch, Rogge had finally caught up with old Bowman. The old ghost was in good spirits and eager to go about his day. When Rogge stepped in his way, Bowman tried to pass through the wall to leave for his alchemy class. Rogge stopped him with a question that had been nagging at him. "How's the Philosopher's Stone?" he asked. "Destroyed," Bowman answered bluntly. Rogge blinked. "But I thought it was impossible to destroy." "It wasn't the complete stone," Bowman explained. When Nicholas Flamel produced it, the substance was an empty shell. During refinement, it had absorbed a great deal of life force by accident. It could prolong life, sure, but not indefinitely. Flamel himself is brittle. His bones would break with a sudden movement. The true stone, in its red phase, is said to grant much more, but that wasn't it. And it had no Midas touch effect. It wasn't useful for alchemical transformation. Rogge considered that. So the shell was empty because something had already taken the life energy. "All right, can you still use blood magic?" Bowman spread his translucent hands. "Blood magic? I can't even perform ordinary spells now." "Have you ever seen a blood beastman? Studied them?" Rogge pursued. "No," Bowman said slowly, thinking, "but I have seen an animagus. When a wizard permanently or long-term takes an animal form, their magical capacity diminishes, in some ways similar to a squib." "A squib?" Rogge leaned forward. "So an animagus's magic level falls to something like a squib's?" "That's a fair analogy, in effect. But they're fundamentally different. A squib is born without magic. An animagus is using magic to keep an animal form." Bowman's voice took on a note of interest. "I once helped a blood beastman who had fully transformed into their beast self. I've been researching ways to return them to human form. That's difficult," Rogge said, but the idea stirred him. It would be an extraordinary thing to do. Bowman's regard for him shifted. He had expected the boy to be another Slytherin who only acted for advantage. Instead, there was warmth to Rogge's concern, a Hufflepuff's willingness to help. Seeing Rogge's sincere ambition to tackle the blood curse, Bowman offered what advice he could before slipping through the wall and on to his class. Chapter 145, Lockhart Everywhere. "The blood curse isn't fixed," old Bowman said. "It weakens as descendants multiply. Among sisters of the same generation, one might still carry it while another does not. So to deal with the blood curse, the first step is to find it," Rogge said. "I suggest looking in the magical community. Hogwarts is an option." "Look for blood beastmen?" Harry asked. "No, you already have blood beastmen. Look for wizards whose bloodline lacks the curse. For example, a mother might have it, but her child does not." Rogge nodded. "Finding such cases would be difficult. If an animagus is willing to cooperate, you could even narrow down the curse's location," old Bowman added with a laugh. Animagi were rare. A wizard willing to shift into an animal for an experiment was rarer still. Rogge glanced at Ron. That rat of his, Scabbers, might make for an interesting candidate. Dear Mr. Peter, recipient of a first-class Order of Merlin, would surely be pleased to devote himself to the magical world, he thought with a private smirk. "Hey, Gryffindors." Rogge caught up with them and greeted them easily. Rogge, Harry and Ron straightened, stepping protectively in front of Ginny. What do you want? Don't be so tense, Rogge said, smiling at Ginny behind them. This must be the youngest Weasley, Miss Ginny, right? Stay away from my sister. Ron moved as if to strike, but Rogge caught his wrist. Mr. Weasley, control yourself. Gryffindor stands for courage, not recklessness. I hear your wand is broken? Humph. Ron flashed his broken wand and pointed it at Rogge. Even broken, I dare you to duel me. Do calm down. You should know me. I rarely use magic on classmates. I usually settle things with my fists. The words brought back the memory of last semester. Rogge's punch that had left Ron in the hospital wing for 3 days. Harry and Ron glared. It's just that my magic is too strong, Rogge continued, his tone disarmingly bland. You can't really stand on the same level as me right now, so I don't risk using spells. It's fine if stray magic damages a plant, but if it hits a person, I'm not sure even Madame Pomfrey could fix that. His cheerful smile and matter-of-fact delivery carried a thin thread of condescension. If I accidentally kill someone, hey, everyone needs to calm down. I'm a gentleman. I don't like to fight, and I'm not a bad person. Mr. Potter can attest to that. Harry? Ron said, incredulous. Harry looked Rogge over. The man was making it clear he wasn't on Voldemort's side. Harry stepped forward. So what? What do you want? Just a trade, Rogge said. Mr. Ron, I hear you have a rat. Interested in selling? No, your stinking galleons won't buy scabbers. Ron shoved Rogge away and they moved on, but Rogge's voice followed. Or maybe rent. 100 galleons a term? Ron's steps faltered. He didn't turn. Rogge smirked. 500? Mr. Weasley, if I'm not mistaken, your family's not well off. That money could get you a new wand. That's none of your business. Still, the offer stands. Rogge let the remark hang, his gaze lingering on Ginny, curious whether the youngest Weasley might be tempted. Everyone knew the Weasleys weren't wealthy. Teasing the boys was one thing, but for a girl like Ginny, still finding friends, an offer could mean something. Rogge thinks he can buy anything with money? To hell with his galleons. Ron complained to his brothers as they walked back. George and Fred chuckled and agreed. By afternoon, the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom had the atmosphere of a celebrity press conference. Beside the lectern hung an enormous self-portrait of Gilderoy Lockhart, and every wall was covered with glossy pictures, his sunny grin beaming at everyone, trophies and ribbons arranged like proof of his greatness. No amount of decoration could quite hide the fact that Lockhart was a showman, and to many who knew a little better, a charlatan. Rogge smiled privately. Lockhart's own abilities might be limited, but his books contained real tricks worth reading. 7 thick volumes sat in a neat pile on the teacher's table. Even if the author had exaggerated, the practice tests Rogge ran through before important examinations had taught him that these pages held useful information about vampires, yetis, and other dark creatures. At least you'd come away knowing what to do if a female ghoul took a shine to you. Anything more specific than be brave would be welcome. Rogge, Lockhart is our new professor. Look at his smile. So handsome. My heart. Daphne gushed, fanning herself. Daphne, you're drooling. Rogge handed her a handkerchief. She took it flustered and pouted before tossing it back. You don't understand Professor Lockhart at all. I'm not sitting with you anymore. I'm going to find Hermione. Eh? Daphne stormed off. In the back, Hufflepuff's Susan sat with a teetering stack of books, blushing as she tried to read. The book's upside down, Rogge observed. Daphne had no appreciation for true beauty, he thought. Women were fickle. Susan's face flushed scarlet as she turned her book right side up. Rogge closed the last of his volumes, Me, the Wizard, and decided he had learned everything he needed for this term's Defense Against the Dark Arts. Professor Lockhart swept into the room with an assistant in tow, Harry, apparently, by his side, and took center stage. He introduced himself with the same practice speech he'd used 100 times, then added, shamelessly, I won't boast about my achievements. I see you have all my published works, he smiled. Excellent. We'll begin with a little test, nothing to be afraid of, just to see how well you've read and understood. The students leaned forward, expecting practical questions, how to repel vampires, how to handle a hostile ghoul, or at least a few useful household spells. Instead, the test was a parade of questions about Lockhart himself, his favorite colors, who inspired him, which of his books was his best work. It was clear the test was an exercise in flattering the professor and sorting his true fans. Rogge glanced at his paper. The questions were painfully obvious. He'd memorized them when he'd glanced through Lockhart's latest book. He could have answered every one without thinking, but he refused to play along. He couldn't imagine standing before Lord Voldemort and asking him what he preferred for dinner. So why would he spend his time writing down which shade of blue Lockhart preferred? It felt like a pantomime of adoration. If the test earned points for being a sycophant, then maybe, he thought dryly, it would help you find a position among Death Eaters. After all, strange alliances had their peculiar rewards these days. Half an hour later, Lockhart collected the papers and read them aloud to the class. Tsk, tsk. How is it that almost no one remembers my favorite color is lilac? Oh, Rogge, I remember you were such a devoted fan. Why is yours blank? He knew Rogge's reputation among the students and enjoyed putting him on the spot. Mr. Rogge, handing in a blank paper shows you're not taking this class seriously. Slytherin, 5 points deducted. But Miss Granger knows everything about me. He turned over Hermione's sheet and nodded enthusiastically. Excellent. My secret ambition is to rid the world of evil and to sell my own line of shampoo. He beamed. 100 points. Where is Miss Hermione Granger? Hermione's hands were trembling with excitement. Lockhart smiled indulgently. Excellent. Gryffindor, 10 points. He could see some of the students doubting him, and it annoyed him. He bent down to lift a large, cloth-covered cage from a table. Small, twitching tentacles at the edge of the cover made a few of the younger ones shiver. Now, be very careful. I will teach you how to cope with some of the most wicked creatures in the magical world. You will confront terrifying things in here, but remember, as long as I am present, the heroic Professor Lockhart will stand before evil and keep you safe. And all you have to do is stay quiet. He put a hand on the cage, drew his wand, and adopted a solemn tone. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the covered cage. Please, no screaming. Screaming enrages them. He whipped the cloth away to reveal a mass of Cornish pixies. Siamis in the front row snorted. They were tiny, bluish-gray things, about 8 inches tall, hardly frightening. The class broke into suppressed laughter. Lockhart's smile froze. He felt his authority slipping. All right, since you're so convinced they're harmless, let's see how you handle them. He had meant to release only one, but at the sight of their disdainful faces, he flung the cage open and let them loose. The shrill pixies scattered, chittering and darting around the classroom. They overturned books, ripped up papers, and smashed a window. A couple grabbed Neville by the ears and tried to hoist him toward the ceiling. Several swarmed Rogge's desk and pulled faces at him like the worst of imps. One pixie saw the ring on his hand and tugged. It couldn't pull it free, so it bared serrated teeth and actually tried to bite the finger. Enough! Rogge slammed his hand down on the desk and sent the pixie flying. Petrificus Talus! The spell flew cleanly from his wand and froze every pixie in midair. They clattered to the floor, rigid. The classroom fell silent. Susan kept glancing at Rogge, cheeks flushed. She wasn't sure if she'd been scratched. Now you see how dangerous they can be. I told you Cornish pixies are among the trickiest creatures you'll meet. Lockhart drew a breath, still rattled. One pixie had nearly snatched his wand. A good spell, but of course not quite up to my standard. He smoothed his hair, which had been mussed in the melee. Rogge, the proper charm to deal with them is Pescapixie Pesternomi. Pixie, go away. He rolled up his sleeves and waved his wand toward the frozen pixies. Seeing Rogge's indifferent expression, he forced a winning smile. All right, everyone, return them to the cage. Next, I'll release them one by one, and each of you will repel them with Pescapixie Pesternomi. Understood? Understood, came the chorus. Thanks to Rogge, Lockhart still looked like a competent professor to most of the class. Many were still dazzled by his persona and assumed this was a staged lesson. Lockhart, restored to authority, began putting the petrified pixies back on the desks. Then, to demonstrate counter-curses, he raised his wand and said, Finite incantatum. A thin beam of light shot from his wand and struck the nearest pixie, but nothing happened. Lockhart blinked, then tried again. Still the pixies remained as stiff as carved toys. Did everyone see my movements clearly? he asked, loudly, trying to sound confident. Yes. Very good. Now, starting from the first row, come up one by one and cast the spell on them. He placed one of the rigid pixies on the desk as an example. One by one, the students stepped forward. They pronounced finite incantatem as best they could, but the pixies did not stir. Lockhart watched with fake encouragement until the inevitable came. When Ron Weasley lifted his wand, still damaged from earlier events, there was a misfiring, a loud crack, and the petrified pixie shattered into pieces under the strain of the botched spell. Professor, I didn't mean to, Ron protested. Down! How could you use a broken wand? Lockhart pounded the desk, furious but trying to hide his fluster. Ron slunk back to his seat, face burning. Lockhart smiled tightly and swept a look over the baffled classroom. Do you not understand why Petrificus Totalis will not be undone? He allowed the students' confusion to swell in the room, then explained grandly, it's a matter of spell power and technique. If I and you cast the same charm, my spell will dominate. Your magic is not as well honed, your output not as controlled, and you are nowhere near the power of an experienced wizard. That's only natural. He implied, less overtly this time, that because his own obliviate was so potent, others could not easily reverse his work. He tried finite incantatem once more, using a little more force on a freshly petrified pixie, but again there was no response. Voices started whispering and asking whether he was truly capable. Lockhart coughed awkwardly. At that moment, the bell rang, and the class was mercifully over. All right, that's all for today. We'll learn Pescixi Pesternomi in the next lesson. The students, still shaken, hurried out of the room. After they had gone, Rogge approached Lockhart. Professor, I've finished reading all 7 of your books. If there's nothing new to study, could you sign me a permission slip? A permission slip? Lockhart blinked, puzzled. It would excuse me from attending second-year Defense Against the Dark Arts, Rogge explained calmly. Chapter 147, Jackdaw Magic Society. What? You want me to help you skip class? Rogue, though I know my heroic and glorious past puts a lot of pressure on you, you're still young, Lockhart began, incredulous. All right, Professor. Rogue tapped the table and pointed at the house elves. If you don't sign, these little elves will remain under Petrificus Totalis. I'm quite capable with certain spells. You may have to ask Headmaster Dumbledore to undo it. Lockhart looked at him. Without this annoying young wizard around, no one would disrupt his classes. He wasn't here to be a sideshow. He was a renowned scholar and teacher who had taken on Harry Potter as a student. Fine. All right. Lockhart picked up his pen and signed the note. I know you're trying to get my signature this way. Thanks, Professor. Rogue took the note, waved his hand, and turned to go. Wait, Petrificus Totalis. Before he finished, a flash of light shot from his wand. The house elves sprang to life, and the one on the table immediately began tearing at Lockhart's robes. Rogue left with a satisfied smile. After dinner, all the students who wanted to join the Ravenclaw Magical Society gathered. Rogue scanned the room. Aside from several second years, there were no older students. Marcus had wanted to come, but seeing mostly second years, he shrugged and left. The eligible Slytherins were all here. Daphne, Malfoy, and Nott. From Gryffindor, Hermione. From Ravenclaw, Anthony and Terry. From Hufflepuff, Susan. Including Rogue himself, there were 8 of them. Neville stood at the edge of the group, hopeful. Rogue, can I join? Malfoy was about to sneer, but Rogue patted Neville on the shoulder and pushed him forward. Neville, your grades last year didn't meet the requirements. You only passed potions. I know, but I remember you said the club could have special admissions. Of course, Rogue said, if you have exceptional skill in a particular subject. He looked at Neville. For example, I'm good at herbology, Neville said, head down. Herbology was the only subject he'd earned an outstanding in last year. Malfoy snorted. Rogue shot him a warning glance. Do you think your herbology is better than the rest of ours? Neville hesitated. Rogue smiled. All right, we have 8 members total. If you can defeat half of us in herbology challenges, you can join. Everyone okay with that? Everyone nodded. I'll do it, Neville said, clenching his fists and committing the faces of the challengers to memory. Malfoy watched him run off and laughed. He won't come to me, wouldn't cut him any slack. Let's move to the secret classroom. Rogue led them to a tidy room on the 4th floor he'd already prepared. He opened a box on the table and took out 8 enamel badges. "These will be our Ravenclaw Society badges," Daphne said, examining them. Each had a tiny Lily of the Valley emblem and a unique serial number on the back. "The lily on it will bloom depending on your annual assessment," Rogge explained. "If you fail, it stays a bud. The badges can also send messages to one another." He took badge number 1 and fixed it to his robe with a sticking charm. The first lily immediately blossomed. "Can I have number 2? Malfoy asked, reaching into the box. 2 cold glares landed on him. "Humph, is there a fight about it?" he added, staring at Hermione and Daphne. Despite his show of bravado, he kept hold of the badge. "Badge number 1 is the president," Rogge said. "Number 2 is vice president. The rest are for members. Pick which you want." "Vice president is mine," Daphne said, drawing her wand and glaring at Malfoy. "Do you think you're fit for it? If not, duel me." "Me too." Hermione stepped forward. She wouldn't let anyone else have number 2 either. "President, are the other badges all the same?" Nott asked, taking badge number 3. Rogge nodded, and Nott stuck his badge to his chest. They decided badge order by how quickly each of them could snatch a badge. In the end, only numbers 2, 7, and 8 remained. Rogge waved his wand, and a long dueling platform rose into the center of the classroom. Malfoy climbed onto it, facing Daphne and Hermione. "Which of you goes first?" he asked. "I will," Daphne said, stepping up. The two awaited Rogge's explanation of the rules. "I don't believe in honor duels," Rogge said. "Anything goes except the unforgivable curses. One rule, the winner is the one left standing on the platform." "Does that include punching someone off?" Malfoy grinned, balling his fist. 3, 2, 1, begin. Expelliarmus, Wingardium Leviosa. They cast almost at once, but Daphne's spell was quicker and struck first. Malfoy was lifted off his feet and slammed back onto the platform. Before he could recover, Daphne ran forward and snatched his wand. "My dear Miss Granger, I was only joking." "Get down," Daphne kicked, and Malfoy pretended to fall off the platform. "Fine." He grumbled and handed the badge over, then took badge number 8 with a sulk. "Hermione, your turn," Daphne said, turning serious. She'd long wanted to test herself against Miss Granger. Academically, Hermione might outrank her, but a duel was a different matter. "Rogge, can't there be 2 vice presidents?" Malfoy complained as he clutched his shoulder, watching. "If the president isn't here, whose orders will you follow?" Rogge replied dryly. There was a charged excitement among them. As the most promising young witches and wizards of their houses, they all wanted to know whose magic would prevail. Hermione and Daphne took opposing ends of the platform, bowed politely despite the anything goes rule, then assumed starting stances. Spell after spell flew. Expelliarmus, Levicorpus. Levicorpus met with counterspells and defensive charms. Their magic intertwined and ricocheted across the platform, neither one yielding. Hermione's constant reading showed she knew more spells than Daphne to draw on, while Daphne's raw power and sharper reflexes made her a dangerous opponent. Spotting a moment when Hermione's movements slowed, Daphne cast the Leglocker curse. "I win!" she cried triumphantly. "Not so fast!" Hermione smiled and shot a precise Petrificus Totalis. The beam hit Daphne directly, and she froze, collapsed onto the platform. Hermione Granger wins. Although Daphne's raw power slightly exceeded Hermione's wider repertoire and better timing proved decisive. Rogge had worried she might resort to something extreme like Sectum Sempra, but his fears had been unfounded. Daphne handed badge number 2 to Hermione with reluctance, then turned to glare at Malfoy. "Don't look at me. I have number 8, she snapped, clenching her fists. Malfoy forced a gentlemanly smile and reminded himself to behave. Hermione pinned badge number 2 to her chest. "Your power is very strong," she told Daphne. "If you practice some more, you might beat me. We should spar often. It'll make both of us better." Daphne nodded. She was disappointed but not defeated. "Yes, I'll train harder and learn more spells, but I do have an advantage in raw magic." She turned to Nott. "Nott, let's practice spells together from now on, okay? I promise I'll go easy on you sometimes. I won't make you lose face too badly." Nott gave a polite, slightly flustered smile. "Of course, Daphne." Daphne laughed, but inwardly she was still annoyed that Nott had snatched badge number 3 while everyone was dueling. Chapter 148, Stand on the Acromantula. Now that everyone's badges have been handed out, I'll go over the Magic Club's future activities, Rogge said, stowing away the dueling platform and turning to face the group. There are 8 of us in total. We'll meet here every Monday evening. At first, I'll teach you spells and practical combat techniques. Later, once you find areas you're good at, you'll take turns leading sessions. Accio, Rogge flicked his wand, and a box containing an acromantula flew across the room. A collective scream went up. Everyone stepped back. Don't worry, I've already crippled it. He released the creature. Its eyes were clouded over, and it had been hit with the leglocker curse, so it could only stand there, hissing. Rogge, are you going to make everyone fight it? Hermione asked, a little anxious despite the creature's obvious incapacitation. Even so, its hideous bulk and hairy legs were intimidating. No, you'll be fighting these dummies. Rogge waved his hand, and the lights dimmed. 8 practice dummies appeared around the walls, each holding a wand-like device that could flash with light. Watch? Rogge climbed onto the acromantula's back. The spider shuddered and hissed, trembling beneath him. When you're standing on the back, your vision will be plunged into darkness. The 8 dummies will light their wands at random, sometimes 1, sometimes 2. Expelliarmus? Rogge's eyes tracked a flash to his right, and he dispatched that dummy's wand with a quick flick. Your job is to disarm them. If a dummy hits you with its wand, your face will be smudged with colored paint. When Rogge had disarmed all the dummies, the room brightened again. Everyone applauded, but their nervousness remained. This was an acromantula, dangerous even crippled, and the sight of its huge fangs and hairy legs was unnerving. Rogge hopped off the spider and faced the group. I'll go first. Hermione, a Gryffindor first year and the Magic Club's vice president, stepped forward without hesitation. Be careful, Rogge warned as he helped her up. Standing on the spider's back, she felt her courage waver. The animal swayed beneath her, its hissing echoed in her ears, and she could feel hairs brushing against her clothes. When the room darkened, it felt like the world had narrowed to just her and the spider. She drew her wand and told herself to focus. Bang! A dummy's wand flashed behind her. Hermione snapped her head around and stumbled into a beam of light. A smear of red paint covered her nose. Left, she muttered to herself, forcing breath into her chest. The wand at her left flared. She tried to speak the spell, but her throat was tight. Expelli! Another blast hit her. The paint splashed across her left eye. Don't be nervous, Hermione. Rogge's voice came from the dark. You're a witch. You have the power to control this. Yes, I am a witch. I can do this. She calmed, steadied her breath, and when the dummy directly in front of her lit up, she shouted, Expelliarmus! The spell flew true, and the dummy's wand went sailing. Again, she cheered, scrambling on the spider's back. Then her foot slipped and she fell. Careful! Rogge reacted instantly and caught her. She flushed, smelling the faint, soapy scent of his clothes. Daphne snorted coldly at the scene. Malfoy shot Daphne a puzzled look. What are you staring at? Mind you don't fall into the spider's mouth, someone jibed. Hermione climbed back up, more composed despite the colorful smudges on her face. She moved with greater confidence, chanting crisply and disarming dummy after dummy. 5 minutes, 8 hits, not bad, Rogge said, nodding and motioning for the next person to take their turn. Hermione hurried to wipe the paint from her face. She figured there'd be someone worse off than her by the end. I'll go. Daphne leapt onto the acromantula's back. It wasn't bravery, so much as indifference. She didn't care what she was standing on. She just wanted to beat the dummies and make a dramatic exit. Rogge warned her, You've already been hit 10 times and fallen twice during practice. If you fall again, it'll count as a failure. Humph, impossible. Daphne tossed her head and stamped an exaggerated step on the spider to make it fidget. 2 beams of light flashed toward her. She spun and dodged with the same poise she used for dancing, then caught one with a sharp Expelliarmus. 3, 5, 8. She struck them down in quick succession and passed the challenge. 13 minutes, 18 hits, Rogge said, trying not to laugh at the colorful mess on her face. All right. He looked at the remaining students. They were eager but tense. Gentlemen, what are you waiting for? I'll go. Malfoy and Nott both stepped forward at the same time. They sized each other up. Malfoy thought Nott looked like someone he'd be on even footing with. Very well, you decide who goes first. Malfoy, you go first. Not grinned and stepped back. Malfoy nodded, determined not to be outdone by the girls. "Watch me," he muttered, climbing onto the spider. It was noticeably edgier now after the earlier runs. "Rogge, do I really have to stand on it to cast?" "Of course. You wouldn't want me to carry you up, would you?" Rogge replied dryly, drawing laughter from the others. They took turns. Only half the group managed to complete the challenge. To Rogge's surprise, the fourth person to pass the test was Susan from Hufflepuff. Steady and efficient. He looked a little helplessly at the remaining three boys. How could they stand on the acromantula and still be afraid to cast? "Anthony, do you need a little help?" Rogge asked, and with a flick his wand transformed a broken table into a spider-shaped cushion sized just for standing practice. He couldn't help but sigh. These boys were starting to show their nerves. Anthony accepted the cushion gratefully. "Thanks, I'll make one for my bed," he said with a small, embarrassed smile. The gesture steadied him. He resolved to overcome his fear. "Malfoy, Terry, your casting motions are too slow," Rogge lectured the remaining students. "You need to strengthen your physical conditioning and practice with your wands. Wand movement isn't just something you think about, it's muscle memory." "Muscle memory?" The students looked puzzled. "Well, it seems you still need to learn some Muggle knowledge," Rogge said. "Muggle!" Malfoy barked, indignant. Nott bristled as well. "Do we really have to learn Muggle things?" "Yes," some of the others answered, half laughing, half exasperated. Chapter 149, Owl Siler. "All right," someone called. "On the condition that you beat me first." Rogue stretched his wrists and gave Malfoy a half smile. "Then I'll go first." Malfoy sighed, resigned. He knew when to yield. "And not," Rogue added coolly, "dodging all the time won't change the inevitable. You need to take opportunities to bring the practice dummies down, not wait for their magic to run out." Rogue flicked his wand. A red beam lanced out, and the acromantula let out a short, ragged shriek before collapsing. Its already blind eyes twitched once, then went still, an odd mix of comical and terrifying. Everyone's faces tightened. They cast spells at school all the time, but killing a living thing was different. Acromantula, currently the dominant species in the Forbidden Forest. Not native to Britain, they came for reasons we're still figuring out. Rogue spoke calmly as he began to dissect the carcass with steady, efficient movements. With a small knife, he slit the belly, located the venom gland, and with a practiced flick, removed it into his hand. Last semester, acromantula venom went for about 100 galleons a pint. According to the current market. "I know," Malfoy interrupted, practically buzzing. "Nocturne Alley sells it for 1,200 galleons. Everyone stared at him. Where had he learned that? Rogue glanced at him coolly and wondered if Lucius would have tongue-tied his son if he knew how loudly Lucius's heir bragged. Rogue poured the venom carefully into a small bottle and handed it over with a warning not to lose it or use it without permission. "In future, I'll take the club into the Forbidden Forest to hunt these," he said. "The proceeds will fund the Ravenclaw Magical Society's activities." "Rogue, give me that venom. I can sell it for a good price," Malfoy said, eyes shining. He slipped the bottle close to his chest like treasure. This was the club's income, and his face showed that he wouldn't betray that trust. "Hermione, you keep the accounts." Hermione blinked at him, then nodded. "I'll handle activities and the money. It keeps everything transparent." "Fine." Hermione's agreement was quick and sensible. They weren't short on money, but that kind of organization built trust. Small details mattered if they wanted to keep working together. That night in the dormitory, Rogue had just lain down when his badge beeped. Daphne, who hadn't yet gone to sleep, was poking at her own badge, wondering if Rogue would reply. "Rogue, next time you go into the Forbidden Forest, can I come?" she tapped. "No," he answered bluntly. "Don't be mean. I'll behave." He'd never been gentle. "I don't believe you. Good night, Miss Greengrass." Rogue cut the chat off. If he hadn't, Daphne would have kept messaging all night. She tried a few times more, and seeing no answer, hugged her pillow in a cross little huff and went to sleep. The next day, everyone wore the new golden badge of the Ravenclaw Magical Society. Students glanced enviously. Goyle and Crabbe reached to touch Malfoy's. He slapped their hands away. "This is mine. You can look, but don't touch," he crowed, covering the badge with his palm and parading it around like a fisherman showing off a prize catch. It wasn't that his parents had bought it for him. This badge represented last year's effort, something he'd earned himself. And Harry didn't have one. He did. "Rogue, our team's training tomorrow. Want to come watch?" Malfoy asked, still on a high. "No." Rogue refused again. Memories of the summer Quidditch marshes were vivid. Broomstick flying still didn't appeal. "In a few days, the Second Amendment to the Muggle Protection Act will be released," Rogue went on. "The Ministry's lifting the ban on magic carpets. With those available, who's going to still buy brooms?" "Magic carpets? Nothing can compare to a flying broom," Malfoy scoffed. The rest of the group divided into factions, Carpet Party and Broom Party, and argued fiercely. The market had already opened to carpets. Broom manufacturers would have to adapt soon or lose customers to cheaper, easier carpets. Daphne didn't join the debate. She liked to sneak out at night and play. One night she found Rogue alone on the Quidditch pitch. "Are you up to something secret tonight?" she asked, suspicious and bright-eyed. "Training sailor," Rogue said. "No secrets." "Sailor? Your owl? Doesn't it fly really fast?" "I'm training it in magic." Rogue shrugged. "I wanted to bring Yumi to school for training, but she bolted and disappeared the first day." Rogue sounded annoyed whenever he talked about that cat. She liked lazing around and being doted on. Nothing tempted her away from comfort. Training her with special potions, she'd refuse 1,000 times over. "Magic?" Daphne tilted her head. "Owls are just mail carriers. What use is training them in magic?" "Owls are born with decent magical talent," Rogue said. "Wizards mostly use them for messages, but I've been studying methods to let them learn special charms." He whistled sharply toward the tower. Sailor answered, swooping down to land on his shoulder and cocking its head to look at Daphne with big, curious eyes. Rogue recited Sailor's dossier as if reading from a file. Sailoritas, species snowy owl, rare. Traits, loyalty, never betrays its master and can be entrusted with important tasks. Acuity, excellent eyesight and direction sense. Resilience, greater endurance and survival than a normal owl. Skills, night vision, search, track, hypnosis, beginner. Level 10. Training notes recommended enhancing the owl's magical talent with daily magic feed, a recipe of spicy grass and devil's nettle juice, among other ingredients, mental training to learn hypnosis, and timed companionship during reading to improve intelligence. Daphne's eyes widened. "No way! Owls can actually cast spells?" Sailors started learning a bit of hypnosis. "Want to try it?" "I'm not going to be the subject," Daphne said quickly, then looked around and settled on Goyle. "Goyle, come here." Goyle stumbled over, bleary-eyed. "What is it, Daphne?" Daphne pointed at Sailor and said in a whisper, "Rogue says the owl can do a hypnosis charm. Come try it." "Hypnosis?" Goyle's eyes went wide. "You mean it can make me sleep?" "It can put part of your brain into a dormant state, so we could ask you things you wouldn't remember." Rogue tried to make it sound harmless. Sailor turned its head all the way around, blinked at Goyle, and gave a clear, soft hoot. "You're joking." Goyle took a nervous step back. "I don't want to be a test subject." "You'll get something delicious if you do," Daphne bargained. "Delicious?" Goyle's resistance wavered. "Donuts, cauldron cakes, Honeyduke's candy." Daphne rattled off the options, and Goyle rubbed his stomach. It wouldn't hurt to try. According to a BBC report on September 28th, actor Michael Gambon's family said Gambon had died in hospital at the age of 82. Goyle finally couldn't resist the temptation of snacks and agreed, "All right, I'll do it, but promise you won't curse me or ask embarrassing questions." Roger smiled and nodded. "Don't worry, Goyle. No pranks." "I trust you, Roger. Come on, treat me afterwards." "No problem." Roger patted Sailor, the owl, and it straightened, fixing Goyle with a pair of huge amber eyes. The pupils dilated and contracted as magic coursed through them, and a heavy drowsiness rolled over Goyle. He fought to keep his eyelids up, but his thoughts blurred. Roger gave Daphne a look. She could ask. "Goyle, what was the first-year password?" Daphne asked. "Viridian." Goyle answered without hesitation. Daphne's eyes widened in surprise. Goyle was not known for a sharp memory. He forgot spells almost as soon as the professor finished them, so remembering last year's password was remarkable. And the current password. Glory. "Very good. Goyle, who do you have a crush on?" Daphne pressed, unable to contain herself. "Daphne," Roger warned. "Just one question," she murmured. "Pansy." Goyle blurted it out. "Wow. Daphne covered her mouth in delighted surprise and hugged the owl. Sailor recoiled, giving Roger a wary look. Roger, can I borrow Sailor for a few days? You aren't going to do anything bad, are you? Humph, how could you think that? I'm a lady. Daphne kissed the owl and darted off with it before Roger could finish. I haven't agreed, he shouted after her, but she had already vanished down the corridor. Without the basilisk to terrorize the place anymore, Hogwarts felt calm and ordinary again. Students laughed and played, oblivious to dangers that might still be edging closer. In the damp, gray end of September in the Highlands, rain had the castle perpetually wet. One evening, Roger was in the clubroom studying samples of Nagini's blood when Malfoy burst in, crestfallen, clutching his Nimbus 2000. What's wrong? Roger glanced up. Malfoy stared at the floor and sank down in front of the acromantula cage. In the past, he would have been terrified of the huge spider. He'd barely managed to stand when casting a spell in its vicinity. This time, he just looked hollow. Seeing he wasn't in immediate crisis, Roger went back to his notes. There had been no breakthrough with Nagini's blood yet, but there were clues about lycanthrope and vampire physiology. Both felt neither wholly living nor wholly dead. Contamination in their blood drained life, and yet some strange magic kept their bodies functioning. With the element heart's help, Roger could sense a bloodthirsty force in the test tube devouring life. Added unicorn blood resisted it until after a certain number of drops, both the contaminant and the unicorn blood vanished. He marked it down. Unicorn blood suppressed but could not cleanse. Past a limit, both perished. Maybe I need to start at the source, Roger muttered, returning his attention to the jar. He finally looked back. Malfoy was still slumped there. What is it? You look like you've been dumped. Roger, do you think we can beat Gryffindor? Malfoy asked. You don't have confidence? Malfoy tried to sound sure. Slytherin had 7 Nimbus 2000s and practiced to intimidate the Gryffindors. But Harry also had a Nimbus 2000, and though Malfoy wouldn't admit it, Harry flew better. They had matched brooms. Malfoy felt outmatched, and it ate at him. Even though I don't play Quidditch, it's a team sport. If your team is better trained, you win. Do you think having 7 Nimbus 2000s makes losing inevitable? I think we can win. Malfoy forced a smile. You sound uncertain. Why worry about Harry catching the snitch? Because he flies better than me. I practiced a lot, even in the rain, but I can't seem to close the gap. For the proud Malfoy, admitting that Harry might be better hurt. He came here to the club alone to stare and be alone with his feelings. Roger clapped him on the shoulder. Don't give up. Want to try something? Fight it. Fight what? Malfoy glanced at the acromantula and shuddered. Try the spider. It's fine to lose once. Malfoy hesitated, then climbed onto his broom, circling and looking for an opening. When the cage was unlocked and the leg locker charms loosened, the acromantula surged out. Blind, it relied on air currents and sound. It lunged straight for Roger. Idiot, Roger muttered, grabbing a stool and slamming it into the spider. The beast was thrown back, a front leg crippled. This one's nasty. Maybe another day. I want to try. Let me. Malfoy insisted and rose into the air. The spider hissed up at him. Hands trembling, Malfoy cast Defindo. The spell severed 2 of the spider's legs into splinters. It still leapt, jaws snapping in the air. Impedimenta, Malfoy cried. The spell slowed the spider and sent it crashing to the ground, belly up, struggling to right itself. Malfoy exhaled with relief. He had beaten a dangerous creature. Roger warned him to be careful. The acromantula wasn't finished. Its spinnerets squirted a sticky white secretion that ballooned into a massive web and wrapped around Malfoy, yanking him toward the ground. Roger, save me, he hollered. The spider's legs thrashed, drawing its prey in. Roger flipped his wand and said, Sectum Sempra. The curse struck true. The acromantula fell still. Malfoy sat gasping, drenched in sweat, shaking as if he'd pulled himself from the water. Thank you. I thought it was going to bite my head off, he stammered. Roger cut through the web with a small knife and tossed it to Malfoy. Failure isn't shameful. At least you faced it. Now help me. While it's fresh, we need the venom. Malfoy's hands trembled, but he obeyed. The spider's belly yielded a dark liquid that splashed on him. Roger lectured him calmly. Assume Harry will take the snitch. Figure out a way to respond from that assumption. To win, you must be ready for losing. Later that week, Roger was back in the Forbidden Forest. The giant spiders had grown smarter. They stayed within territories and set traps, waiting for prey to blunder into their webs. That made it harder to catch solitary specimens. Roger, invisible under a disillusionment charm, slipped between tree trunks where caves were draped with gossamer threads. He transformed a leaf into a small rabbit and nudged it toward one of the webs. It got its hind legs caught and flailed. A fat, dull-eyed acromantula descended cautiously. Lately, the clan had lost members under strange circumstances. Father Aragog had ordered extra vigilance. The spider sniffed at the tiny rabbit and turned up its mandibles in disgust. Small prey was a waste of web. It would rather eat something bigger. Before it could decide, a flash of light swept the clearing. The world went black for an instant, and then the rabbit was nothing but shredded leaves in Roger's knapsack. Larger spiders soon arrived to report another missing member. "That's the fifth," one hissed. "What could take them without a trace?" "I don't know. I'm scared like never before," another replied. "We should tell Father and maybe Hagrid." Aragog, ancient and blind from cataracts, listened gravely. A few missing spiders weren't a crisis, but the idea that something could snatch them without a trace worried him. He waved his thin legs and told his children not to provoke the wizards of the castle. Their fangs and silk might not be enough against us if the wizards turned fully hostile. That night, Roger slipped back into Hogwarts as curfew approached. He walked invisible past Filch. Madame Norris's whiskers twitched, as always. Filch had found some damp cat food left in a corridor and scolded the empty hall. The last time a joker had given him a bag of food he'd tried, it had made Madame Norris picky, and Filch's already meager lot had only gotten harder. "If I ever learn magic," he muttered to himself. Roger smiled, unseen, and headed toward the great hall. He spied a head of red hair slip around a corner. Ginny, dodging past a patrolling Percy. She moved cautiously, talking quietly to herself. Roger followed at a distance. "Good evening, Miss Weasley." He tapped her shoulder. Ginny jumped, a feather stuck to her hem, fluttering free. Roger covered her mouth until she nodded, then spoke softly. "You shouldn't be wandering at curfew." She looked startled and guilty. "Aren't you breaking the rules too?" she whispered. Roger shook his head. "Different. I know a disillusionment charm. It hides me." "Are you up to something bad?" she asked, eyes wide. He pinched the feather between his fingers and looked at her. She cringed and pressed herself against the wall, pale and trembling as a cornered animal. "Am I that scary?" Roger said, surprised. He wasn't beloved by everyone, but he wasn't terrifying, at least not on purpose. He offered a warmer smile. "Gryffindor prides itself on courage. You're a Weasley. Brave, aren't you?" Ginny blinked up at him, reassured by the gentler tone. Roger kept his watchful smile, a small, odd protector in the dim corridor, as the castle settled into the long night. Chapter 151. Who spends Halloween with ghosts? My brother says you're a bad person. Ginny's voice trembled. She kept stealing nervous glances at Rogue, then looked down again. I ran into some upsetting things, so I came out to clear my head." "Bad person? He's just jealous." Rogue appraised her. Her school robes were shabby and ill-fitting, making her look like an awkward little thing. "Going out late to clear your head, Gryffindor doesn't seem as united and friendly as it brags about." He walked closer and leaned against the wall, idly tucking a feather into her flame-red hair. "Careful, there's a Peeves about the school, and he isn't nearly as polite as I am. Say, are you interested in renting Scabbers to me?" "That's my brother's." Ginny didn't refuse outright, but it was obvious she meant no. Rogue smiled. "It's practically family property then. 500 galleons, no strange conditions, just a short-term rental. I promise you'll get him back in perfect condition." Ginny shook her head, refusing silently. Rogue shrugged. "Not even worth thinking about? This will stay between you and me." He straightened, offering fake consolation. "Don't cry. I'm sorry, really. I am." Ginny wiped at her eyes and slipped away, keeping close to the wall. October rain only worsened. Bullet-sized drops hammered the stained glass and everything was damp. Rogue even invented a drying charm to keep the air tolerable. Daphne sniffled and sneezed. She was already the 5th club member to catch a cold. "Are you all right?" Rogue asked as Hermione pressed a hand to Daphne's fevered forehead. A coup." Daphne sneezed again mid-sentence. "Daphne, Go see Madame Pomfrey, Rogue ordered. He shook his head. Club activities would have to be suspended for now. Daphne pouted, embarrassed and miserable at her own bad luck, and hurried off to the hospital wing, nose pink and tear-streaked. This is odd. Hermione folded her arms, watching the emptying room. Why is everyone catching colds lately? Besides the weather, something else feels wrong. Rogue agreed. Wizards caught illnesses, of course, but widespread colds weren't usual. Except for dragonpox, infections don't normally spread like this. Something odd must have gotten into the castle. Strange things? Hermione's mind darted to creatures that carried disease. She looked around nervously. An acromantula? No, the kids in our club weren't the first. Rogue thought of Ginny. The little witch had probably opened the Chamber of Secrets. Air trapped for 1,000 years mixing into the castle could explain a contagion of this sort. Hermione, try not to go out at night. Do you know something? Hermione studied him. It always seemed Rogue was a step ahead. Not yet. He shook his head, then used his badge to notify the others. The club's meetings were moved to Sunday afternoon, no more night sessions for now. Hermione nodded, but Rogue couldn't be sure she really took the warning to heart. He watched her hurry away, then sighed to himself. If being handsome were a crime, he'd be irredeemable. He opened his bag, and Nagini slithered out, curling against his arm with a serpent's affectionate coiling. "Master, shall I give blood?" she asked softly. Rogue produced a needle. "I'll keep you in the dorms for a while. If you hear strange parcel tongue near you, don't reply." "Understood, Master," Nagini said without question. Rogue's commands were law. As Halloween approached, Ginny drifted out more at night. Rogue often found her wandering the corridors while he trained Sailor. To anyone watching, she might have looked like she sleepwalked. Percy, on prefect duty, had spotted her several times, but always looked away at just the right moment. He pretended not to see a sister breaking the rules. He had other grievances. His 3 younger brothers were careless and always out causing trouble. He thought they should at least be sensible. Percy watched the rain patter against the window and fretted over Molly's letters telling him to take care of the family. Arthur's work at the ministry had stalled. Whispers said he might be sent to the Arctic Circle to guard the flu network. Amelia had resigned as head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and the new head's name sounded suspiciously like Dolores. Percy thought of Rogue's influence. If Rogue could write him a recommendation, might it be easier to get a ministry post? He'd heard a head boy could have a direct path into the ministry after graduation, and Percy had been planning that route. "Who's there?" Percy called a moment later, hearing a strange sound at the corridor corner. He found only a trail of watery footprints and a puddle. "What's wrong, Percy?" other prefects asked as they came by. "Don't know what house it was, traipsing about in this rain." "Percy, what do you plan to do after you graduate?" Davis asked. His owls had been dreadful, only 6 passes. Percy had 12, and the sort of options Davis envied. "The ministry," Percy said with forced confidence. Davis patted his shoulder. Percy smiled bitterly. He couldn't blame his father for being oddly aloof with pureblood wizards. Arthur's reputation might count against Percy at the ministry. His oldest brother Bill wrote from Egypt that his curse-breaking work at Gringotts was going well but poorly paid, and house expenses were pressing. Percy sighed enviously of Rogue's apparent wealth and influence. If only he had those resources, he could open a shop in Diagon Alley and help the family, but his talent was in books and examinations, not invention. He kept walking the empty corridors, unwilling to think about graduation. Halloween arrived, and the Great Hall was full of festivities. Hermione, costumed as a vampire, pretended to bite Daphne on the neck. "Ah, I'm dead!" Daphne collapsed theatrically onto Hermione, then stuck in some false fangs and pointed at Rogue. "Behold, the vampire queen. Bow before me." She leapt onto a chair with little felt wings and painted red nails, mock clawing at Rogue. "Dream on." Rogue disarmed her with a quick gesture and plucked the fake teeth out. "Hermione, save me. The vampire hunter's too strong. I cannot continue." Daphne fumbled and stumbled into Hermione's arms. The nearby students laughed and applauded. Hermione, feeding off the crowd's energy, quickly dressed herself in a magnificent cloak with a wave of her wand. "Where did you get that?" Daphne demanded, immediately poking and pulling at the costume. "I followed the book exactly." All right, Daphne, you are dead. Dead? They just pulled my teeth out, Daphne protested. Details, details. It's my turn to perform. Hermione stood, flung her cloak aside, and struck an exaggerated pose. I was born of blood and death. I slept in an ancient sarcophagus. Glory was my past. Death is my creed. Vampire hunter. Rogue, it's your line, someone called. Line? What am I supposed to say? Rogue glanced between the two drama queens. Say present. Present, Rogue answered, cheeks flushing a little under the hall's lights. Hermione continued, brandishing her wand. Vampire hunter, you slew my fledgling. You broke the vow of life and death I shared with her. I, Hermione Granger, ancient and noble queen of the bloodline, will avenge my Daphne. What are you doing? Attack. Really attack? Idiot. Of course it's fake. Just wave your wand, then I'll pretend to strike and die. Hurry. Fine. A crowd gathered. The skeleton dance at the center was impressive enough, but Hermione's performance drew everyone's attention. Rogue and Hermione clashed wands in staged combat for a few beats. Hermione made a calculated step, shoved Rogue's wand aside, and theatrically plunged her own wand toward his chest. Vampire hunter, you are too weak. Die, she cried, touching her wand to him. Time to fall. Ah! Rogue overacted his collapse with an elaborate backward swoon and slumped onto the table, feigning death. Daphne, I have avenged you, Hermione cried, throwing her arms around her friend and kissing her on the cheek. Hooray, we win! Daphne leapt up and the students roared their approval. As Hermione rose to accept the applause, something, a small, mocking voice, seemed to poke her back. The vampire hunter, in his last breath, took the vampire queen with him. The wicked shadow was banished forevermore. Wonderful, someone cheered. That wasn't in my script, Hermione said, frowning. Rogue had altered the ending. Professor Lockhart suddenly pushed through the crowd, radiant. Splendid, simply splendid. There's more nuance to the relationship between vampires and hunters than that. I wrote an entire book on it, Voyages with Vampires. The students turned toward Lockhart. Many admired him. Rogue rolled his eyes. Lockhart, undeterred, warmed to his favorite subject. If you'd read my book, you'd know vampires have deep feelings. Lillian and I, we had a terrible adventure at sea. Hatred, then understanding, then trust. He sniffed dramatically. She burned herself to save me from the sun. His eyes moistened as he spoke, and Rogue had to begrudgingly admire the performance. Lockhart's endless self-congratulation continued unabated. I think we could stage a play, make the vampire queen fall for a human girl. The girl is turned, the boy trains as a hunter and slays the queen, learns too late that she's become the thing he fought. He wanders off into the storm. At that moment, thunder rolled, and a hush passed over the hall. The girl, seeing him leave, walks into the storm herself. The rain stops, a rainbow appears, the sun finds her, and she burns to ash, tragically beautiful. I'm a genius. Lockhart clapped his hands and basked in the glow of the students' attention. I will play the boy's mentor. No, I should play the boy. Or better yet, his eyes landed on Professor Snape, and he smiled with the kind of grand scheme only Lockhart could imagine. Snape will make a perfect vampire queen. His expression is just right. Harry could play the human girl. McGonagall can be the mentor. He saw theatrical gold in every arrangement, imagining the headlines in a flourish and blots contract. Kettleburn, who loved theatrics, eagerly joined the plan. I support it, Kettleburn chimed, his enthusiasm immediate. McGonagall's memory of Kettleburn's previous disastrous performances, notably in Ashwinder that set the hall alight, made her scowl. Kettleburn, you're retiring soon? One more performance? If you don't trust me, trust Lockhart, Kettleburn pleaded, seizing Lockhart's hand in hope. Lockhart straightened his cloak and offered his long list of honors and awards like a drumroll. Order of Merlin, 3rd class, honorary member of the Anti-Dark Arts League. He beamed, and everyone around him smiled indulgently. We should be careful not to expose students too early to honor and praise, Lockhart admonished in mock seriousness, casting a practiced smile at Hermione and Daphne. McGonagall looked between Kettleburn and Lockhart and felt a headache coming. Dumbledore regarded the plan thoughtfully. Lockhart was harmless enough in his ambition, and Kettleburn's enthusiasm was hard to resist, but McGonagall worried what the combination might produce. Outside, the storm continued to rumble, and the castle hummed with the excitement and absurdity that was Halloween at Hogwarts. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Good for Reunion. Bad for werewolves. Chapter 152, Basilisk Infested. The younger students were enthralled by Lockhart's stories, hanging on every word as they ogled their adored headmaster. "All right, I promise," Lockhart said grandly. "But be careful. I don't want the Great Hall being set on fire by Ashwinders again." "Don't worry, headmaster," Kettleburn said, clapping Lockhart on the shoulder with more force than was comfortable. "Lockhart's stories won't need Ashwinders. I'll contact friends. Real Eastern European vampires." He turned to Dumbledore, grinning proudly. "I guarantee it. 63rd detention if I'm wrong." "Vampires?" Dumbledore raised an amused eyebrow. "Of course, Professor Lockhart, you mustn't kill them during rehearsals. We need them for the performance, so be merciful." Kettleburn squeezed Lockhart's arm happily. "I will. If you've read my books, you know I'm excellent at making friends with vampires." Lockhart flashed his practiced smile, though inside he was panicking at Kettleburn's enthusiasm. "Ha ha, of course. You'll even demonstrate personally how to defeat vampires in Defense Against the Dark Arts," Kettleburn said, pulling Lockhart into a hug. "Personally demonstrate." Lockhart's composure broke. Kettleburn was clearly serious. "Don't worry. I also have a hippogriff. We can let the student playing the boy ride it. That'll be most spectacular." Kettleburn was unstoppable when it came to drama, and the crowd loved him. Lockhart smiled through it, listening to Kettleburn's plans. From a short distance away, Severus Snape chuckled under his breath at the spectacle. Meanwhile, Harry, Ron, and Parvati had just left the Ghost's Death Day party. They walked down a corridor lit by black candles. "Do you think there might still be some pudding left?" Ron hoped aloud. The food at Sir Nicholas's party had all been inedible to the living, and their stomachs complained loudly. A cold wind skittered through the corridor, and a familiar voice cut through the air. Tear you, kill you." Harry halted, pressed his hand to the cold stone, and strained to hear. The voice was jagged, halting, not forming a full sentence. It was the same cold, murderous whisper he'd heard once before in Headmaster's office. "Harry, what's wrong?" Parvati asked, noticing his sudden stillness. She reached out and touched his forehead, his face flushed. Ron snorted. "I didn't know our Gryffindor flower had a thing for Harry," he teased. Parvati blushed and pulled her hand back. She'd always been curious about the boy who lived, and Hermione's absence from their usual circle had made it easier for Parvati to be bold. Harry felt a flicker of unease mixed with a thrill. The voice was somewhere close, he was sure of it, moving through the walls above them. "Shh," Harry whispered. The voice came again, fainter. "So hungry. It's time to kill." "Quick, this way," Harry cried and took off. Ron and Parvati followed, breathless, as he sprinted up staircases and across galleries. Laughter and the smell of food drifted from the Great Hall, but Harry paid it no mind. "Wait for me, Harry," Ron yelled behind them, but Harry held up a finger and motioned for silence. The whispering continued. "Blood! I smell blood! Kill! Kill! Kill!" They fanned out like bees lost from their hive, searching the dim third-floor corridors. Between two windows, something shone. Harry approached slowly, eyes narrowing. Red letters had been smeared on the wall, dark and glistening by torchlight. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." "It's written in blood," Ron breathed. "And what's that hanging there?" Parvati pointed. They edged closer and saw the dark shape dangling against the wall. Madame Norris, Filch's cat, hung limp and stiff. The three teens stumbled back, nearly slipping on the wet stone. "Harry, let's go," Ron hissed, but the corridor behind them filled with students returning from the feast. Their noisy chatter died instantly when they saw Madame Norris. The quiet that followed felt heavy and afraid. "It's always the quietest when it's the worst," Snape murmured, staring at the bloody writing. Around them, the students' eyes turned to the three who had found the scene. Colin Creevey raised his camera, fingers trembling, but Percy shoved it away. Draco Malfoy pushed to the front and read the message, then sneered and pointed at Harry. "He's the heir of Hogwarts," he shouted. "Tongue-tying charm," Snape said flatly, and flicked his wand. Malfoy's mouth clamped shut, and he wilted, cheeks flushed with the effort. Filch was pulled toward the commotion by the silent crowd. He pushed through, saw his cat, and went white. He gasped, and then collapsed to his knees, clutching Madame Norris, keening, "My cat! My cat!" The sight was heartbreaking. Filch's red-rimmed eyes looked like a man possessed with grief and rage. He glared at the students, and the crowd shrank away, leaving Harry closer to the front than he wanted to be. You killed her!" Filch shrieked, lunging at Harry. "I'll kill you! Stop, Argus!" Dumbledore's voice rang out, and Filch froze, shaking. Tears tracked down his face as he stared at the headmaster. Dumbledore and the professors pushed through the crowd. When the headmaster saw the message on the wall, his face grew grave. "Everyone return to your dormitories immediately," he ordered, "except for you three." "Headmaster, I happen to know a thing or two about the air," Snape said suddenly. Heads turned. Malfoy's accusation had barely been made when Snape spoke up. Dumbledore nodded for him to continue. He, too, wanted to hear what Snape knew. According to Hogwarts A History, the school was founded by four. The heir, in legend, would be a descendant of one of those founders, Snape began. He paused and added, "The Bloody Baron, he killed Helena Ravenclaw and later took his own life to atone. That, perhaps, explains his nightly visits to Ravenclaw Tower." The Ravenclaws nearby let out a relieved murmur. "The heir could be pure blood or half-blood," Snape continued. "The Slytherin line survives. The Gaunt family were direct descendants of Slytherin. Of course, that doesn't mean the heir isn't among Slytherin. We are the house with the most pure-blood families. I'm not certain of the Gryffindor line's name, but their descendants are said to have vivid red hair," he added. A dozen voices chimed at once. Red hair, pure blood. Everyone looked toward the Weasley table. The Weasleys exchanged nervous glances that were half pride, half unease. "As for Hufflepuff," Snape said, turning his attention away, "her line seems to have faded. Rumor calls them Smiths now. Hepzibah Smith. Voldemort's theft suggests Hufflepuff's direct line may have been broken." The students argued and whispered among themselves. According to Snape, the heir seemed most likely to come from either Slytherin or Gryffindor. "As for the Chamber of Secrets mentioned in the message," Dumbledore said slowly, stepping forward, "there is legend. Salazar Slytherin and Godric Gryffindor were once friends, but they fell out over the question of Muggle-born witches and wizards. Slytherin left the school, and legend has it, he built a secret chamber. He hoped that one day his heir would open it and purge the school of those he deemed unworthy." "Unworthy of learning magic?" Malfoy began to say, but Snape's glance silenced him. "These are legends," Dumbledore soothed. "The school has investigated before and found nothing. But," he looked around at the pale, anxious faces, "that does not mean we can dismiss what has happened tonight." A dozen Muggle-born students swallowed. The petrified cat and the smeared message were more than a coincidence. Filch glowered at Dumbledore. "Who did it? Someone must be punished. My cat." His voice cracked. Lockhart stepped forward, perfume wafting, all too ready to take the spotlight. "How tragic. I've read of similar attacks in distant lands. Why my autobiography?" He stopped when Dumbledore examined Madame Norris and spoke softly. "She's not dead, Argus. She's been petrified." "Petrified?" Filch stared at his cat as if unable to comprehend the word. "We will find a cure," Dumbledore assured him. "Professor Sprout's mandrakes are growing well. When they mature, they can be used to brew a restorative potion." "Headmaster, why not source mature mandrakes elsewhere?" Snape suggested. "They can be difficult to cultivate and take months. The Ministry has branches in the Southern Hemisphere that might help." Lockhart, desperate to seem useful, brightened. "Meanwhile, I've grown mandrakes before. I listen to their whispers each day. Plants have feelings, you know." His claim produced a mixture of gasps and horrified looks. Professor Sprout's face darkened. She shook her head at the ignorance on display, while Lockhart continued, undeterred. "I've brewed with them 100 times. I can even brew in my sleep." "Excuse me," Snape interrupted coldly. "I am the potions professor." His tone made Lockhart shrink a little. He then turned his attention sharply to Harry. Snape had been searching for Harry at the feast and had not found him. "Why were you not present at dinner, Mr. Potter?" Because, Harry began, but Snape's stare was like a physical weight. "We were at the Death Day party. Hundreds of ghosts can vouch for us." Parvati stepped forward on Harry's behalf. "And why did you run upstairs afterward?" Snape demanded. Ron's stomach growled right then, and Snape's amused glance suggested he thought the trio were lying. Harry wanted to tell them about the voice he'd heard, but the memory of Snape's sharp eyes and the murmuring students chilled him. If he said he'd heard a voice like a whisper, they might brand him the heir, the one who could control the creature in the chamber. Or they might think him mad. He kept silent. Headmaster, my recommendation is that Mr. Potter be suspended from the Gryffindor Quidditch team until he explains himself fully, Snape said, cool and precise. Severus. Professor McGonagall stepped forward, took Harry's arm, and planted herself between him and Snape. Whether this writing or the chamber is real or not, it has nothing to do with this child. They simply stumbled upon what you discovered. Snape and McGonagall stood at an impasse. Dumbledore intervened gently. The matter before us is Madame Norris, not Quidditch. Harry is a good boy. I do not believe he is responsible. We must seek the truth, not lay blame. He turned his kind, pale eyes to Harry. If you know anything, speak freely. With us here, there will be no danger. Dumbledore's gaze seemed to look straight through him, and Harry felt as if the headmaster could see to the very bottom of his thoughts. Chapter 153, Call Me Shadow Prefect. While they argued, Rogge reached up and scraped some of the still wet blood off the wall. Hermione, he whispered, and everyone turned to him. I want to test what kind of blood this is. What kind of blood? They all looked at him strangely. Could that even be tested? With so much blood, it must be easy to sample. We don't have magic to distinguish blood types, but Muggles do. They can analyze whose blood it is. Maybe it will help us find whoever wrote this. Muggles? The others were more baffled. Rogge's suggestion made the whole thing absurd and yet oddly logical. Hermione hadn't expected him to suggest Muggle methods. Though she'd been born into a Muggle family, a year at Hogwarts had pulled her toward a wizarding way of thinking. Wizards always looked down on Muggles, quietly, sometimes cruelly, and the idea of asking Muggle science for help felt strange. The message on the wall warned that the heir of Slytherin had appeared and would purge Muggle-born witches and wizards. Yet Rogge, Slytherin's shadow prefect and a member of a proud, pure-blood family, wanted to enlist Muggle assistance to trace the culprit. It was unexpected. Snape, however, suspected some of the reason. This boy had always been fascinated by Muggle inventions. Last year's magical instant camera had been a clear imitation of a Muggle camera, and Mrs. Jessica had mentioned at the Moon Mirror Hall banquet that Rogge wanted to make color magical photographs. That kind of thinking, bringing Muggle technology into the wizarding world, required both knowledge and imagination. Now, with no spell to identify blood, Rogge immediately thought of Muggle medical testing. That was the kind of breakthrough Snape expected from him. Hermione's father is a doctor, Rogge added. If we send a sample, he can get it tested quickly. With no objections, he collected the blood into a test tube and handed it to Hermione. I'll have my father right back right away. Hermione took the tube with mixed feelings. She wasn't sure if her father could help, but she trusted Rogge enough to try. If magic couldn't solve the problem, perhaps Muggle medicine could. If it worked, it would be a blow to the old ways of thinking in the wizarding world. Rogge leaned in and murmured something in her ear. Hermione's expression flickered between disbelief and carefully feigned indifference. Dumbledore watched Rogge thoughtfully. He had long advocated for equality between wizards and Muggles, but was the wizarding world truly ready for Muggle technology's influence? He decided to watch this boy more closely. If change ever came, who would push for it? Afterward, the professors sent the students back to bed. Madame Norris was carried to the hospital wing. Rogge, Malfoy, and Daphne walked back to the Slytherin common room together, and many eyes followed them, some curious, some wary. Rogge, if it wasn't you, who would it be? Malfoy murmured. You mean the heir? Yes, that person. Malfoy's voice dropped. It's hard to say. If the Chamber of Secrets was meant for Slytherin's descendants, this year's events might not be random. Rogge's suggestion swirled with possibilities. So the heir might be a new student this year? Daphne scanned the faces of the first years and made them squirm. Discuss this later, Rogge said. Back in the common room, the green light made everything feel colder. Living underground and watching the giant squid through the glass, Rogge thought about the notion of changing Slytherin House itself. Wizards shouldn't be afraid of the surface. They should study the stars, pursue truth, and live in towers that let them see the world. The others argued and speculated about the heir. There were no Muggle-born students in Slytherin, so many felt safe. Several proudly traced their ancestry to families linked with the Gaunts. Old bloodlines and status were on display. Rogge scoffed inwardly. His Travis lineage among the Sacred 28 needed no boasting. Rogge, any clues? Is Hermione in danger? Daphne worried for Hermione. She was the only Muggle-born member of the Magic Club, and if the legend were true, she might be the target. Rogge patted Daphne's shoulder to reassure her, then raised his voice. Quiet, everyone. The blood writing wasn't a supernatural apparition, he said. It was written by someone. Wizards can't identify handwriting in blood, otherwise we'd know the heir. But we can cross-check who disappeared from the Halloween feast tonight. Whoever disappeared is the heir, someone blurted. The students looked around and quickly found the uncomfortable answer. Everyone in Slytherin had been at the feast. Nobody had left or gone missing. If the heir had shown themselves somewhere else, they weren't in Slytherin. Oh, came the chilling realization. Then the heir is in another house. Maybe their intentions aren't aimed at Muggle-borns after all. After all, they didn't target our house. You mean us? Several faces went pale. Will they attack Slytherins? No, it's the heir of Slytherin, another reminded them. They could be a witch. Rogge, you said they might be half-blood. What if her mother was a Muggle? Then she betrayed Slytherin. Malfoy's voice was full of outrage. The conversation froze. Everyone remembered the bloody message. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. Rogge forced them to look closer. You're fixated on the first two sentences, but the final word, beware, matters too. They considered it. Beware could be a threat, or it could be a warning. If the heir wrote it, in what spirit did they write that last word? Rogge made them think like the heir might. If you were the heir of Slytherin, how would you write it? Nott sniffed and said, if I were the heir, I wouldn't announce the chamber was opened. I'd say something like, the heir has returned. Violators will be killed. Malfoy imagined grander rhetoric, expel Muggles, purity forever. Daphne listened and then concluded, it doesn't sound like a death proclamation so much as a warning. Exactly, Rogge agreed. Someone discovered the heir or their return, and they warned others without saying it openly. That suggests a complicated situation. We can't act rashly. If the heir opposes the old Slytherin line, pureblood wizards could be in danger. I suggest everyone travel in groups after school. Don't go anywhere alone. Everyone agreed at once. Safety matters always galvanize Slytherins fast. Do you think the chamber is in our house? Daphne asked, and the common room fell into an uneasy hush. If the chamber were present in Slytherin, anything might emerge at any moment. Hard to say, Rogge said. We were all at the feast, and the house has wards against intruders. If the chamber were here, it would probably have been noticed. We don't know what Slytherin left behind. Meanwhile, Filch's days were empty and bitter. He'd been distracted and absent-minded, spending his time beside the hospital wing where Madame Norris lay petrified. The caretaker envied Wizard's powers. He was a squib and helpless. He'd raised Mrs. Norris from a kitten, fed her fresh fish from the Black Lake, and she'd been his only loyal companion at Hogwarts. Seeing her frozen on a stretcher had broken him. Professor Lockhart had been useless and bluntly dismissive, so Filch did something unexpected. He went to find Rogge. Roger, are you free? He asked after class, waiting outside. Rogge led Daphne and the others away and followed Filch to the caretaker's office. Filch did not waste time. Do you know where there are mature mandrakes? Why didn't you ask the headmaster? Rogge asked. I did. Albus said none had been found in the southern hemisphere yet. Filch's disappointment was plain. I came to you because I thought you'd understand. I'm a squib. No wizard will put much effort into finding a cure for a cat. I brought Mrs. Norris up myself. She's my helper, my family. Lockhart laughed it off and sent me away. I can't stand it. Filch choked up. Roger watched the man's grief and felt something, pity, and perhaps a flicker of recognition. Filch snuffled and went on, describing Mrs. Norris's loyalty and their life together. Finally, he looked Roger in the eye and pleaded, Do something. I'll do anything. I'll pretend not to see you when you need it. Just help me save her. Roger hesitated. Mandrakes will take time to mature, he said. Professor Sprout's plants won't be ready soon. I'll pay. I'll give everything I have. Filch clasped his hands. In his mind, Rogge was not just a boy, but a Slytherin of consequence. Please, be my friend. Call me Shadow Prefect. Roger's eyebrows lifted. Filch's earnestness, the way he offered homage, tugged at something. If Filch truly meant it, he would not bargain. Filch stepped forward and in a small, oddly respectful gesture, kissed Roger's hand. "Shadow Prefect," he murmured. "Very well." Roger smiled and patted Filch's shoulder. "I'll use my connections to try to find mature mandrakes, and I'll help prepare an antidote myself. As for who petrified Mrs. Norris, there are clues. I may need your help one day, or I may not, but I'll do what I can." "Thank you, Lord Travis," Filch breathed, deeply grateful. After leaving Filch's office, Roger sent a letter by owl to his villa in London. Sailor, his enormous owl, took the message and flew off. Jessica received it and, with a flourish, put up a reward in the magical world, 1,000 galleons for a pot of mature mandrakes, paid by the Travis family. For them it was little. In the wider wizarding community, it would be enough to stir people into action. Chapter 154. Here Comes the Herbs. There were many kind-hearted people in the magical world, and even the dark wizards from Nocturne Alley set aside their usual business to offer help. Once they heard the reward had been offered by the Travis family, their enthusiasm multiplied. By morning, many witches and wizards had traveled to the southern hemisphere in search of mature mandrakes for Rogge. The British Ministry of Magic maintained 3 main branches in the southern hemisphere: Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, and the quickest route from London was through the Department of Transportation's Flu network. A long line formed in front of the fireplace. People shuffled forward, anxious not to miss the chance to claim the reward. You must be careful to wear earplugs when digging up mandrakes, or use a soundproofing charm to block their screams. Green, an official from the Department of Transportation, called from the steps. "Don't lose your lives for money." "We're not doing this for money," muttered the crowd. "We're doing it to help." "Of course you are," Green shot back with a cold smile, gesturing toward the Nocturne Alley contingent. "Right, Paul from Nocturne Alley? What noble motive do you have?" Paul bristled and denied the accusation. "What bad intentions could I have? I simply want to help." The people in line laughed and began to tease. "Oh yes, he'll help, right after he ransacks the poor fellow's pockets," someone said, "and takes his socks, maybe his gold teeth too, then gives him a kick for good measure." The banter filled the air with a bright, rough kind of humor. Paul protested, blinking shamelessly. "You're biased. I can't be blamed. True beauty isn't widely appreciated." "True beauty indeed," another voice added. "Nocturne Alley will educate the ministry on justice and benevolence." Green, already simmering, barely hid his pleasure. If not for the 1,000-galleon reward, he thought, would these idle troublemakers have bothered at all? He recognized several faces that were on the ministry's wanted lists. Seizing the chance for a tidy bit of law enforcement, he signaled Dolores, who promptly moved in and arrested the dark wizards who had walked straight into the trap. Green cleared his throat and, holding a letter, addressed the crowd. "Good news. A mature mandrake has been found in a German greenhouse, and the first prize has been claimed." "Oi, Germany!" someone shouted. "Who leaked it to those foreigners?" Green's smile broadened. "Mrs. Jessica has revised the reward. The first 9 mature mandrakes submitted will receive 1,000 galleons each. Anyone after that gets 100, and there's a 3-day deadline." "You what?" The line surged forward as people scrambled for the flu. No one wanted to miss out on 9,000 galleons or the extra 1,000. Green watched the Nocturne Alley group's true colors reveal themselves and allowed himself a satisfied grin. Justice and kindness were expensive virtues. "Line up!" Dolores barked, and under the Auror's control, the crowd finally fell into order. Within 3 days, Jessica received hundreds of pots of mature mandrakes. In the Slytherin Manor greenhouse, there were thousands of younger plants. Even with the adjusted reward, tens of thousands of galleons had been spent buying what was needed. Meanwhile, the Halloween attack at Hogwarts had only heightened tensions. Muggle-born students avoided Slytherins for fear of being targeted, and members of the Snake House were nervous too. Rogge's reasoning, that a descendant of Slytherin might break Salazar's last wishes and attack purebloods as well as Muggle-borns, had driven everyone into suspicion. Conspiracy theories and paranoia spread. No one wanted to be the next target. Lessons were halfway through, and the students were listless, yawning over their desks. Even Quidditch had lost its usual excitement. One afternoon, Sailor brought 10 pots of mature mandrakes onto the grounds. Members of the Ravenclaw Magical Society carried them in a parade to the greenhouse. Malfoy and Nott marched at the front, each bearing 2 pots and strutting like commanders of a victory parade. "Look, these are mature mandrakes, the herb that can cure petrification," they announced to anyone in earshot. "Let me see." People pushed forward. "Be careful, the mandrake's scream can kill. Didn't you learn that in herbology?" Malfoy snapped at a student getting too close. Word spread like wildfire. Curious first-years rushed to see a mature mandrake for themselves. Lockhart tried several times to wedge into the procession and launch one of his soliloquies, but was blocked at every turn. He ended up stuck outside, sweating from the crush. The gloomy tension on campus gradually eased as laughter and chatter returned. "What are those badges?" Colin craned his camera and snapped pictures of the few carrying the pots. "That's the Ravenclaw Magic Club emblem," someone answered. "Only students with very good grades can join." "I was one subject short last year," another student said. "I don't know if I'll make it this year." "Better work harder. They add electives in third year. It gets harder to qualify." Colin turned to Harry. "Do you know the requirements?" Harry frowned, unsure. "I heard they're strict. First years can't have lower than an E in anything but flying, and you need an O in one subject." The Ravenclaw Magic Club's reputation spread. Every first year wanted to know how to join until they heard the requirements and agreed it sounded impossible. Professor Sprout, drawn by the commotion, hurried out to find Rogge holding a mandrake. She scolded them all for being reckless and quickly took the flower pots from Malfoy and Nott, not trusting their certainty to prevent accidents. "Be careful, the screams are deadly," she warned, and under her direction, they placed the plants on the gardener's table. Neville, wearing dragonhide gloves, popped his head out from the other greenhouse and waved. "Neville, that's enough for today," Sprout said with a smile. She adored the slightly slow, earnest boy who came to the greenhouse every day. His dedication to herbology had already reached the level of a third year. Embarrassed but pleased, Neville lowered his head. "Neville, tell them what you've been researching," Sprout encouraged. "I'm trying to cultivate a new kind of tramp mushroom," Neville said earnestly. "I want to make them stronger so they'll jump higher. Maybe Aurors could use them in the field." Hermione and the other club members were surprised. It was the first time many had realized how diligent Neville was with plants. Everyone has a talent. Neville's was herbology. He peered at the Ravenclaw badges and whispered, "That's Lily of the Valley, isn't it? It's the symbol of the return of happiness." A few heads turned. Neville clearly wanted to join the club. If he focused like this, he might be specially recruited. For some, that meant a trial. Who would be the first to challenge him? They all looked at Malfoy. Malfoy put on a brave face, but his mind churned. He still had Quidditch to train for and no time to waste in the greenhouse. He couldn't afford to lose to both Neville and Harry. "Professor, can you show us how to handle a mandrake properly?" Rogge asked. "Mandrake is an annual magical plant," Sprout explained as she picked up one of the pots. "When mature, the leaves are smooth and deep green. That's how you know it's fresh and healthy. At this stage, its scream can instantly kill any witch or wizard who hears it. So, in the field, never underestimate an inconspicuous plant." She described the plant's characteristics, medicinal uses, and the precautions for harvesting. Everyone listened intently and took notes. Sprout fetched a specially made wooden box and placed a mandrake into it. "Sound is a magical thing," she said, pouring water into the box's internal container. "A sound behaves differently in air than in water. And merpeople language sounds like an aria underwater, but harsh above water," Daphne said. "Exactly. The mandrake's scream follows the same principle. In air, it's lethal. Underwater, it only creates ripples." Using enchantments, Sprout turned the box transparent and, wearing dragonhide gloves, carefully grabbed the mandrake by the leaves and pulled it free. A grotesque little head emerged, struggling. Before it could scream, Sprout submerged it in the water, disoriented and unable to produce a fatal sound. In the tank, it was harmless. Rogge's eyes lit up. If changing the propagation medium prevented the lethal effect, perhaps a charm could be devised to protect the ears, allowing mandrakes to be dug up anywhere. The idea of a portable protection made him think of future possibilities. When harvesting, use a small silver knife to gently cut the root, Sprout continued. The action must be delicate. Don't let it feel pain. She removed her gloves and took the small knife Neville handed her. With a quick, precise stroke, she separated the leaves from the root. Herbology requires patience and concentration. You can't rush. She left the leaves in the water and moved the root to a dry box. Generally, herbologists don't use magic to divide or process herbs. Using magic can unpredictably change their properties, and that could ruin a potion. Potion makers value simplicity and reliability above all. The root in the tank stopped screaming and became an inert, wrinkled little thing. Now we can take it out, Sprout said. People flinched as the root was lifted, expecting a last-second cry, but it lay quiet in her palm. The final step is to grind the root into powder so Professor Snape can make the depetrifying potion. Under her practiced hands, fresh mandrake root powder was prepared. Filch, who had heard the news, hurried over with tears in his eyes. Thank you, Professor. With this, my cat will recover. I'm just doing what I can, Sprout said modestly. Getting the raw material so quickly was largely thanks to Rogge. Don't look at me like that. I'm always chivalrous and warm-hearted, Rogge said with a grin. This is the raw material, Sprout reminded them. The actual potion still needs to be brewed by Professor Snape. A murmur ran through the crowd. Filch wasn't worried about Snape's temper. He trusted Snape to brew what was needed. Rogge and Snape had different temperaments, but similar reliability. All right, we'll split up, Rogge said, looking at Hermione. Daphne, take everyone to the hospital wing. Hermione, go back to your dorm and see if your father's letter has arrived. Rogge, can muggles really analyze that kind of blood? Malfoy asked, surprised. Rogge had bought some muggle popular science books for the Magic Club. Malfoy read them like fanciful stories and was skeptical that muggles could differentiate blood types. Everything leaves a trace, Rogge said. You need to read more, Malfoy. I've read so much, Malfoy pouted. He'd already been buried under more books this year than in all previous years combined. Outside the greenhouse, a crowd had gathered. Harry, Ron, and the Parvati sisters, first witnesses, waited anxiously for updates. Ginny was squeezed into the mass of people, looking pale and feverish. How are things, Rogge? Someone called. Has Professor Sprout prepared the antidote? Rogge pushed through and headed for the dungeons to fetch Snape. Hermione cleared her throat. The antidote will be made. My father's letter should be in my dormitory. It will tell us what kind of blood was on the wall and help us identify who harmed Madame Norris. Hearing that the injured animal would be protected, Ginny eased out of the crowd, relief and a little hope softening her features. Meanwhile, Rogge and Filch hurried down to the dungeon so Professor Snape could prepare the antidote. Filch practically skipped along, giddy like a child with a new toy, urging Rogge to hurry as if he wanted to carry him to see the potions master. At the dungeon entrance, they ran into Madame Pince in the corridor. She was alone, clutching a book and pacing anxiously. Madame Pince, shouldn't you be in the library? Filch asked, bewildered. I just stepped out for a moment. She stammered, tugging at her hair and lowering her eyes. She suddenly turned and hurried away from the dungeon as if to avoid them, but then she stopped, turned back, and called softly, Rogge. Rogge paused, half expecting some silly matchmaking plot. Madame Pince clearly admired Snape. Had she come to give him a book as an excuse to see him? Still, she pressed the book into his hands, fidgeting. I found this in the library, she said. It belonged to a witch named Eileen Prince. I thought Professor Snape might need it. Rogge took the old leather volume. On the cover, in neat print, was a compendium of magical herbs. The flyleaf was inscribed Eileen Prince, and someone had sketched a few small Grythian fires beside the name. The ink had blurred with age, and the pages were covered in tight, careful notes, clearly a treasured handbook. Eileen Prince? Rogge repeated, unfamiliar with the name, but he could see what Madame Pince was getting at. The lady wanted to curry favor with Snape, and the gesture was perfectly thoughtful. He couldn't resist an inward chuckle. This match had his unofficial blessing. He pushed open the dungeon door and found Snape bent over a boiling cauldron, all attention and concentration. Rogge entertained a quiet, wicked thought about the absurdity of giving a love potion to a potions master. but the task at hand was practical. Professor Sprout has prepared the mature mandrakes. We can begin the litholytic agent. Snape didn't look up immediately. Already? He said, eyes never leaving the potion. Where did you find mature mandrake? All over. Germany, New Zealand. If you look, you'll find them. It just takes effort, Rogge answered, setting the herbs and the book on the table. He thought to himself, where there's a will, there's a way. Snape waved him off, indicating the book could be set aside. The potion in the cauldron was at a delicate point. One slip, and they would have to remake it from scratch. I ran into Madame Pince outside, Rogge added. She asked me to give you this. Put it on the shelf, Snape replied, his fingers trembling the slightest bit as he refused to meet the subject. Then, as Rogge turned to do so, Snape's hand darted out and snatched the book. He opened it, stared for a moment, and the tight control on his face broke. He read the flyleaf, traced the familiar handwriting and the Gubrathian flames with a gentleness that surprised Rogge. Professor? Rogge asked cautiously. She's my mother, Snape said, voice thick with something like memory, as he flipped through the pages. Eileen Prince. She was a witch. She was... He stopped, the words failing him, and then folded the book into the inside of his robes as if protecting it. Rogge realized the book had unlocked more than just information. It had stirred Snape's past. The cauldron gurgled ominously, sending a few sparks of color into the air. The potion required careful timing. Thank Madame Pince for me, Snape muttered, closing his expression and resuming his stern, inscrutable bearing. He turned to Rogge with the same cold gaze of a harsh examiner. You will prepare the litholytic agent. Yes, Professor. Rogge felt the familiar chill of being under Snape's scrutiny. He knew any mistake would be seized upon, so he set about his task with meticulous care. Before Rogge could begin, Snape sneered, Are you waiting for me to clean the bench for you? Without a word, Rogge cleaned the work surface, cauldrons, test tubes, racks, every bottle and tool precisely arranged. He purposely left no loose ends for Snape to find. Snape watched him, searching for faults, but Rogge's movements were exact and deliberate. Snape consulted his hourglass and his watch. The hourglass he used flowed faster than ordinary ones. This was not a standard half-hour measurement. Rogge felt relieved to have anticipated even that. He measured the herbs to exact weights and laid them out in order. Before starting, he checked the formula and the method one last time. Any special precautions? Rogge asked. Hopper juice and marshmallow must be added simultaneously, Snape replied, and neither must be exposed to sunlight. Despite his inclination to needle the student, Snape would not lay a needless trap. He wanted to see if Rogge could handle the challenge of brewing under dim conditions. I understand. Rogge cast a darkening charm. A gray mist crept across the windows, and the room fell into shadow. Filch shifted uneasily. The jars on the shelves seemed to stare back at him with a life that made his skin crawl. He lurched forward, but Snape caught him with a cold hand. If you don't want to become rotten flesh, don't touch the shelves, the professor snapped. I know, Filch squeaked and froze in place. Rogge lit a dark blue flame, a faint spectral fire used for delicate brews. He had thought of everything, right down to the heat source. Snape watched, waiting for a misstep. Unbothered by the dim light, Rogge began. He added clear water to the cauldron, then the mandrake powder, while his wand stirred clockwise with clinically precise motions. The potion slowly deepened to a rich green. He turned the hourglass and waited. When the sand ran, he flipped it again. After the second run, Rogge carefully added 3 drops of hopper juice and the crushed marshmallow leaves at the same instant, then stirred 5 times counterclockwise. As the motion ceased, the mixture flared brilliant red, the exact sign of a successful litholytic agent. Filch stared at the glow with awe, his squib face drawn into longing. If only he could do magic properly, he thought, he would learn to brew beautiful potions like this. He fingered the letter in his pocket, resolved to sign up for a rapid spellcasting correspondence course to shake off his squib status. Rogge doused the flame, tidied the bench, and handed the bottle to Snape. Snape inspected it briefly and gave the faintest of nods. Pass. Rogge's face fell at the lukewarm appraisal. In Snape's world, things were usually either perfect or useless. Pass sounded hardly deserved. But there was no argument. Snape handed the bottle back. Now go. Help Filch depetrify Mrs. Norris. If she can speak afterward, we might learn who did this. They went straight to the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey was at the entrance, her hands on her hips, ushering out a cluster of giggling students. Hermione saw Rogge and gave him a small, grateful shake of the head. Daphne looked confused and slightly annoyed. She hated riddles, but Rogge ignored the chatter. Filch carried Mrs. Norris like a precious burden toward the ward. Madame Pomfrey, the antidote is ready, Rogge announced, brandishing the small vial. Very well, she said, and let them in. Filch fidgeted beside him, eager. Hurry, make her move. He begged, producing a packet of cat food, the same brand Rogge had once given him. Maybe not yet, Rogge said, and Filch looked up, puzzled. Rogge pointed to the frozen cat. She needs a bath first. She hasn't been groomed in ages. Her fur is matted. Filch blinked. When had he last bathed Mrs. Norris? He looked uncertain. Believe me, Rogge said. He'd bathed cats before in his previous life. That resistance in their paws was familiar. Madame Pomfrey listened, surprised to find Rogge so considerate and practical. Her opinion of him warmed a fraction. After you depetrify her, don't feed her anything too strong. I'll make a careful diet plan. You two clean her first. Rogge flicked his wand and turned a chair into a wooden basin. Filch looked hopeful. You're not going to make me fetch water, are you? We could just use aguamenti. Rogge hesitated. The panel that had amplified his spells had only increased their strength, not tempered it. He still couldn't control the power finely. Using aguamenti might be risky. He shook his head. No, I'll do this without calling the charm. Concentrating, Rogge drew on the element heart, coaxing water from the humidity in the air with old runes. Clear droplets condensed in the basin until it was full. Filch didn't notice anything strange and happily set to work. Mrs. Norris, still softened by the potion, lay still as he bathed her. After a careful towel and comb session, the cat emerged pristine and dignified, freshly groomed and very much herself. Filch, bathe her more often, Rogge said, half admonishing, half amused. Madame Pomfrey returned with a small plate of food timed to her plan and nodded at Rogge. You can give her the medicine now. Rogge lifted Miss Norris and murmured, "Delong, time for your medicine." He tilted the vial, and the bright red liquid slipped down the cat's throat. Her body softened, breath returned regular, and in moments she shook herself, stood up, and blinked around. "She's awake!" Filch cried, spinning with joy and nearly dropping the cat. Mrs. Norris hopped to Madame Pomfrey and began to rub against her leg. She was lively and surprisingly well. Filch hovered, practically on his knees, watching her eat with rapt attention. Mrs. Norris raised a paw and lazily batted at his face. "You're back!" Filch wept and wiped his cheeks with his sleeve. He squeezed Rogge's hand. "Rogge, thank you." "We're friends," Rogge said, smiling. "My shadow prefect," Filch declared proudly, holding on to him. Mrs. Norris swept out of the ward with feline dignity and resumed her rounds of the school, tail high, ignoring the students who whispered at her return. The chatter outside ranged from relief to boasting about how they would never get caught on nocturnal mischief again because Mrs. Norris was on patrol. Rogge watched them go. Petrification was bad enough, he thought, but the basilisk's gaze could do worse. If they relaxed just because they had an antidote, the next casualty might not be stone. Unless someone found a way to control the basilisk with parseltongue or killed it outright, they were still in danger. Hermione slipped up to Rogge while Madame Pomfrey was momentarily distracted and pressed a folded letter into his hand. "It's chicken blood," she whispered. "My dad checked. Only Hagrid keeps roosters at the school, but he loves animals too much to hurt them." Hermione knew Hagrid and Rogge hadn't been on good terms. Hagrid often worried about dangerous creatures, and Rogge had accused Hagrid of irresponsibly releasing magical beasts and upsetting the forest's balance. Rogge's dislike of Hagrid was obvious. Hermione had never expected him to be this certain, but she knew Rogge's words weren't aimed at ordinary schoolfolk like Ron or Jordan. Rogge folded the letter and called out to the students still gathered at the ward door. "Thanks to Miss Granger's help, we've found a clue about the blood writing. It's not human." Relief spread through the assembled students. If the message was written in animal blood, perhaps it was a nasty prank rather than an attack on people. They visibly relaxed and began to drift away, eager to discuss other school matters, Hogsmeade permissions, the upcoming Quidditch match, and Lockhart's theatrical lectures. There's still bad news, Rogge added, cutting across the light chatter before they dispersed completely. We still haven't caught the culprit. That sobered them instantly. Conversations fizzled out and the group thinned. Ginny, standing near the front, looked suddenly less anxious. The students filed out, talking in pairs and small groups, trading theories and complaints, but the immediate panic had eased. When the crowd had mostly gone, Hermione lingered close to Rogge and asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell them it was chicken blood?" Rogge pocketed the letter and watched the students file out into the castle corridors, thinking of the dangers that still waited unseen. Hermione had been a little surprised that Rogge hadn't simply told everyone the blood on the wall was chicken blood. If he had, those wizards who like to sneer at muggles would have had to face a bit of muggle science. Yet, in the noisy discussion just now, something had felt off to her. She turned to look at Malfoy. That was it. He was acting strangely. He hadn't even used the chance to sneer at her. Unusual, definitely unusual. "Vice President, don't glare at me." Malfoy snapped, pulling a fresh set of notes from his pocket and reading them aloud in a very proper voice. Muggles distinguish blood types by the kinds, amounts, and colors of respiratory pigments in the blood. The so-called respiratory pigments include hemoglobin, hemocyanin, and strange, where are hemomelanin and hemoalbumin. He frowned at his own notes, as if he might have missed something. "Where did you learn that?" Everyone stared. This wasn't the sneering, pure-blood Malfoy they expected. Rogge told me to read more. I ran back to the club and flipped through the Muggle books he bought. Guess what? I actually found it. Malfoy held his notes up like a trophy, then scowled with mock frustration. Too bad I didn't write down the book title. Despite the grumble, he was smug, especially when he realized Hermione, the insufferable know-it-all, hadn't seen that information. He looked ever so pleased with himself. Rogge, unsurprisingly, took it as an opportunity to instruct. Muggles believe organisms are built from cells, Rogge explained. There's a disc-shaped cell in the blood that carries oxygen and removes waste, the red blood cell. And a micrometer is a unit of length Muggles use. Most of the modern Muggle world uses metric units. Only a few conservative industries still cling to the old imperial system, a legacy of your great British Empire. Daphne scoffed. The Muggle government in Britain is useless then. They haven't even pushed the imperial units away properly. Rogge grinned. He and Daphne both thought the old empire had been propped up by exploitation and that the civil servants in London did little to halt its decline. Rogge's thoughts wandered. Without someone like Dumbledore, could the overseas magical branches be kept in line? He'd heard about the Magical Congress of the United States of America being tricky. Dumbledore's temper had once put them in their place. For the good of the Isles, Rogge thought Dumbledore needed to stick around. But he also knew the White Wizards could be as difficult as any Dark One when it came to politics. Hermione interrupted his musings. "Rogge, why didn't you tell everyone the blood was animal?" "It's not time yet," Rogge said, smiling enigmatically. "Saying it isn't human is enough for them for now. The full truth needs some digging." "Are you two up to something else?" Daphne said, narrowing her eyes. "Don't deny it. I've seen you both sneaking about." Rogge looked surprised. There was a small plan, but it didn't work. Let Hermione explain. Hermione nodded and told the room. "When Rogge gave me the sample, he warned me someone might try to snatch it." "Clever. Whoever tries to snatch it is the heir," Malfoy put in. "Too bad no one tried," he smirked. "I contacted Anthony and Susan and we checked our houses," Hermione continued. "Except for Harry and his friends, Ginny also missed the Halloween feast." "Ginny Weasley? Impossible. A redhead can't be the heir of Slytherin," Malfoy snapped. "If a Weasley is the heir, I'll transfer schools." "Let me finish." Hermione glared. "I don't think Ginny is the heir either. Her brothers started Hogwarts very early, and nothing like this happened before. Her family situation doesn't match the kind of heir who would open the chamber. She is still a suspect." Hermione produced a letter. "So Rogge and I used my dad's letter to test her." "You set a trap?" Daphne's eyes widened. If she was worried about what was in the letter, she might try to steal it or even attack you. No wonder you were talking at the greenhouse door for so long. "Exactly. I put a charm on the letter. Anyone who stole it would wake up covered in pimples spelling, "I am a thief," but no one did. Hermione frowned. Ginny had left early, and the fat lady had later confirmed Ginny returned to Gryffindor. If she didn't steal the letter, what did she go to do? Why had she left in such a hurry? So it's not Ginny. Did Harry lie to everyone? Malfoy's suspicion prickled. He still couldn't get over his obsession with Potter. I tell you, the Gaunts are descendants of Slytherin. Why do people still think it's Potter? Saint Potter, Malfoy sneered, clenching his fists. The Quidditch match is in 2 days. I'll show Potter what real Quidditch is. But my father mentioned the chamber was opened 50 years ago, Malfoy said, looking at Hermione. A Muggle-born wizard died then. Vice President, you must be careful. None of your business. Hermione snapped. 50 years ago? Your father said more? He wouldn't say much, only that the person who opened the chamber was expelled. Malfoy looked puzzled. Lucius's version, that a Muggle-born had died, and Rogge's theory that it was a pure-blood culprit, didn't match. Rogge's mind raced. Did Lucius know something he wasn't saying? Had Lucius seen Hagrid at Flourish and Blots and jumped to conclusions? Whatever the case, Lucius had clearly kept important details from his son. Expelled? That's the official result? Hermione's voice rose. Muggle-born wizards' lives matter too. Why would the murderer be only expelled? She stared at Malfoy, furious. The room fell quiet at the force behind her words. Hermione imagined herself as the victim and shuddered. Would the school simply expel their killer? Malfoy rubbed his head, offended and helpless at once. He hadn't judged the case. He hadn't even been born then, yet he understood Hermione's anger. If a pure-blood wizard had been killed, Hogwarts would have been torn apart to find the murderer, Malfoy muttered. Daphne hugged Hermione, trying to calm her. Hermione, usually so composed, had never looked so agitated. I'll ask Dolores to find that old case file, Rogge said. He was sure Tom Riddle was behind everything. The Ministry had likely found a scapegoat. I want that trial reopened. I'll help, Hermione said. Mr. Riddle needs to stand trial. Maybe we can start a petition to bring the 50-year injustice to public attention, Hermione suggested. Good idea. The whole of Slytherin can get involved, Malfoy offered immediately, with Anthony and Susan eager to help. Everyone wanted to make sure Muggle-born wizards weren't ignored or treated differently. Rogge looked at the troop he'd mobilized and rubbed his temples. He wasn't keen on falsely accusing anyone. He wanted evidence first. Daphne walked Hermione back toward Gryffindor. On the 3rd floor, they rounded a corner and heard Filch's belligerent voice echoing down the corridor. Hermione allowed herself a brief smile. Filch sounded like his old, disgruntled self. The only downside was that being out at night never ended well for the guilty. Who did this? Filch shouted, hanging at an intersection and questioning passers-by. Which little wizard made water pour out of the bathroom? They followed Filch's pointing finger and saw water flooding the corridor near where Mrs. Norris had once been petrified. It was coming from the girls' bathroom. Few students had realized there was a bathroom there. It hadn't been used much since Mrs. Norris was attacked. Meow! Mrs. Norris's plaintive cry came from the corridor. Filch whirled, spotted the culprits, and lunged. You, Potter, Weasley, so it was you two. He grabbed at their cloaks. Mr. Filch, we only came because we saw the leak, Harry protested. Yeah, the faucet was broken and we were helping to fix it, Ron added, indignation written all over his face. Humph, come with me to see the headmaster. Explain it to Dumbledore. Filch muttered as he hauled them toward the spiral staircase to the headmaster's office, cackling about detention and polishing trophies. They climbed to the grotesque stone gargoyle, and Filch shouted its password, Lemon Sherbet. The stone moved aside, and the stairs spiraled up. The office door opened automatically, but the headmaster wasn't in his chair. Filch put on an ominous grin. You two stay put. Don't even think about running. Harry and Ron looked around nervously. The headmaster's office was the most fascinating place they'd been given to see so far. Astronomical models ticked and whirred, odd magical devices sat about, portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses snored in their frames, and shelves sagged with books. The battered sorting hat sat on a pile of books behind the headmaster's seat. Potter? The sorting hat croaked as Harry approached. I still stand by my thought from last year. You would accomplish great things in Slytherin. Because Rogge had told people about Slytherin descendants, the suspicion around Harry had lessened. Only a small handful still thought him a gaunt, and strangely, those were his most loyal supporters, recounting his saving of the magical world as if they'd been there. Harry hung back, uneasy. He started, then shook his head firmly. No, I won't go to Slytherin. Ron gaped. He hadn't expected the Hat to speak at all, and certainly not to hear Harry refuse Slytherin. The Sorting Hat spoke on, as if musing aloud. Not normally can one choose their house, but some young wizards have special circumstances. Special circumstances? Harry? Ron looked at his friend. He fits both Gryffindor and Slytherin. Indeed, the Hat agreed. He has what could make him Slytherin, but also, well, I think Slytherin would suit him. And another last year, a boy with moonlit scent and dragon's blood about him. Rogge, yes, Rogge visited twice in the summer. Very memorable. The Hat's voice was thoughtful. Oddly, Rogge is very suitable for Gryffindor. He has a grand sort of courage. Harry and Ron nearly choked. Rogge in Gryffindor? The thought was absurd. Rogge's cunning, temper, and fondness for mischief seemed the very opposite of the Gryffindor ideal of bravery. Why did he end up in Slytherin then? They blurted. Oh, the Hat said, because his hunger for control and power was as notable as his courage. Like you, Harry, he made his choice. Harry's feelings were complicated. Had he gone to Slytherin, would he have become someone like Rogge? He thought of Rogge's conduct and shook his head. That wasn't the life he wanted. Slytherin didn't have the sort of friends he wanted either. Mr. Hat, why is my whole family Gryffindor? Ron asked, embarrassed and curious. All 7 of us got Gryffindor. For your courage, the Sorting Hat replied. You're not the cleverest, you're sometimes frightened, but your loyalty to your friends surpasses what the other houses prize. That is why you belong in Gryffindor. Ron grimaced when the Hat mentioned his faults, but secretly he was pleased. While Ron and the Sorting Hat talked about blood and houses, Harry's eyes wandered to a gilded perch at the side of the room. There sat a bird, half-plucked, grayish, with a drooping neck and sorrowful eyes. It made a choking sound, and a few more feathers drifted down. Harry hadn't yet realized what it was. If Rogge had been there, he'd probably have scooped the feathers up in a heartbeat. As Harry stared, the bird suddenly burst into flames. No! Harry cried. Ron jumped. It's dead! They looked at one another in panic. Everything that term had gone wrong for them. Trouble getting onto the platform, crashing into the Whomping Willow, Mrs. Norris petrified, and now this, being hauled before the headmaster over something they hadn't done. Merlin, why was this year cursed? Aguamenti! Ron flicked his bandaged wand, intending to douse the flames, but instead of water, a spray of flowers burst from the wand tip in a comical, useless bouquet. Prompted, Harry drew his wand as well. Before he could cast, the bird shrieked, turned into a ball of fire, and crashed down onto a golden pillar. When the flames died away, only glowing embers smoldered. As the 2 boys stood dazed, the headmaster's office door swung open, and Dumbledore appeared on the stairs, his face grave. Professor, Harry and Ron blurted. Your bird, we swear we didn't do anything. It just suddenly burst into flames. Chapter 157. Umbrellas cannot be used against enemies. That's right, we swear on Merlin. We definitely didn't touch him. Ron insisted, nodding so fast his hair bounced. To their surprise, Dumbledore didn't scold them. Instead, he smiled, as if the sight of a bird bursting into flame and turning to ash were something to celebrate. It's about time, he said. Its dreadful appearance has lasted for days, and I kept urging it to act quickly. Dumbledore noticed their astonished faces and smiled more broadly. Fawkes is a phoenix. When a phoenix is about to die, it bursts into flames and is reborn from its ashes. I did not expect it would choose today. Before he finished speaking, a small, wrinkled chick poked its head out from the pile of ash. Featherless, it looked even more ungainly than a plucked chicken, but Dumbledore regarded it with nothing but affection. Charming creatures, he said, bending down. They can carry unimaginable weight. Their tears heal all manner of magical and non-magical injuries, and they are particularly loyal. He stroked the tiny bird and sat behind his desk. It's a pity you saw it at the moment of rebirth. Most of the time it is quite beautiful, red and gold feathers all over. As Dumbledore settled into the high-backed chair, Harry remembered why he and Ron had been summoned. Dumbledore's clear, pale blue eyes turned toward him. "Mr. Weasley, you may wait outside. I should like a word with Potter alone." Ron gave Harry a worried look before leaving, then hesitated and shot one last glance at Harry before shutting the door. Dumbledore's expression became serious. "Harry, I want to speak with you." Harry lowered his head, hands clenched, nerves coiling in his stomach. He had no idea what Dumbledore wanted to know. He thought of running away from the Dursleys, of the Burrow and the Weasleys' kindness, of the incident at Flourish and Blots, and how Malfoy and his father had behaved. He thought of the Patil twins helping with Polyjuice Potion, of the 2 times he'd heard the strange voice, of the notebook he'd found in the lavatory that now sat in his bag. He'd heard whispers that he might have Slytherin blood. When Dumbledore asked gently, "Is there anything you would like to tell me, Harry?" "Anything at all," Harry swallowed and answered softly, "No, nothing." Dumbledore nodded without showing surprise and let the matter drop, watching Harry leave as if trying to read the boy's burden from his posture. As Harry's footsteps faded, the portraits along the office walls stirred to life, chattering and speculating about him and Ron. "Perhaps he's frightened, Albus," one said. "They broke a rule or two," another muttered. "Children that age carry so many worries. Girls no longer speaking to them, pranks discovered, professors' punishments." Dumbledore silenced them with a sharp look. "No arbitrary speculation about students." Silence fell. He turned his attention to the portrait of Armando, his predecessor who had left the school 50 years earlier amid the Chamber of Secrets scandal. "Armando, you must know Hagrid is not the one who opened the chamber." Armando's painted face reddened in his frame. "Oh, I know. Of course I know. But he kept dangerous creatures illegally. Werewolf pups, giant spiders, wandering into the forbidden forest without permission. Those are grounds for punishment." "You were also in a difficult position," another portrait agreed. "If you had been headmaster, you might have handled things differently." The former headmasters debated how Hagrid had been treated and whether he had been made a scapegoat. "That cat being petrified was only the beginning," one warned. "You must be cautious. The chamber's contents can truly kill." Dumbledore listened, firm. "As long as I am here, no student will be harmed." He remembered his suspicions about Tom Riddle decades ago, suspicions he had lacked the proof to act on. When Tom Riddle reported Hagrid for Myrtle's death, Dumbledore had been astonished. Tom's achievements, prefect, head boy, a dozen owls, the Hogwarts Special Contribution Award, made him stand out. Everyone expected great things from him. Later, of course, Tom became the dark wizard whose name no one spoke. Dumbledore leaned back, his eyes drifting to the empty space Harry had occupied. Has Tom's influence returned? He wondered. Harry didn't have Gaunt family blood. What was really happening? A few days later, Hermione brought Rogge to Hagrid's hut to investigate the chicken blood found on the castle walls. She knocked. Hagrid's face brightened when he saw her, but when he caught sight of Rogge, his expression darkened. The hut was larger on the inside, but Hagrid still had to stoop beneath the low beams. He stood with his back to the fire, wearing his oversized mole fur coat. Fang lay by the hearth and, seeing Rogge, bared his teeth with a low growl. Rogge met the hound's glance and Fang sulked, covering his face with a paw. Hermione nudged him, signaling not to make a fuss. "Hermione, it's been a long time." Hagrid boomed, bustling about to make tea and bring out rock cakes. Rogge scowled. He was not about to be impressed by Hagrid's hospitality. On the table lay a plucked chicken. "This is the 5th one that's died," Hagrid grumbled. "2 others are missing. I thought maybe it was a cold, but they're dropping like flies, aren't they?" Hermione wasted no time. "Hagrid, we came to ask you a few questions." "Questions about magical creatures, I hope, because I'm very good at that," Hagrid said, then fell silent when Hermione explained that petrifying messages had appeared in the castle and Mrs. Filch had been found petrified. They were investigating and wondered if Hagrid had noticed anything unusual. Hagrid's face went pale. He shook his head so hard his shaggy hair bounced. "No, nothing. Everything's normal. Don't worry about it." He tried to brush them out of the hut, but Rogge produced a letter and laid it on the table. "What's that?" Hagrid asked, peering at the paper. Rogge pointed to the last line. The blood sample had been tested and identified as chicken blood. Hagrid's jaw dropped. "You mean the writing on the wall? I thought..." You thought what? Hermione pressed. Nothing, I guessed wrong, Hagrid stammered. Hermione watched him closely and saw the flicker of something hidden in his eyes. Hagrid was keeping something back. So the chickens were killed, not by a disease? Rogge said. Exactly. Go check the coop, see if the killer left any clues, Rogge advised, calm but sharp. Fang looked guilty at the suggestion. Fang comes on patrol with me at night, Hagrid said. If anything happened, Fang'd have warned me. Then the killer knows your routine, Hermione remarked. He knows when you're out. He comes when you're not here, and Fang doesn't pick up on him. Hagrid scowled, furious at the idea. Who'd do a thing like that? Instead of shouting, why not go and look? Rogge suggested. The three of them went outside. The vegetable garden had been stripped of pumpkins for Halloween, and a few yellowing vines drooped where the pumpkins had been. Against the back wall leaned a bright pink umbrella. Rogge's eyes flicked to it. The color reminded him of the pink earmuffs he'd seen in the greenhouse. If school supplies were still that same shade, maybe the castle hadn't been updated in decades. There's a fence behind the garden where I keep the chickens, Hagrid said. He watched Rogge eye the umbrella and quickly snatched it up. Hermione looked around the secluded spot. Have any other people been here recently? She asked. Harry and his friends, Hagrid answered. Professor Lockhart and Ginny, too. Mention of Lockhart made Hagrid spit indignantly. He taught me how to stop water sprites getting into the well and bragged about driving off hags, like I didn't know. If there's a true word in half the rubbish he says, I'll eat this umbrella. Hermione, taken aback by Hagrid's uncharacteristic criticism, frowned. Hagrid, don't be prejudiced. Professor Lockhart is our defense against the dark arts teacher. He's got so many titles. Rogge and Hagrid exchanged a look that suggested they shared a private contempt for Lockhart. The man had been endlessly self-promoting, awards, honors, and a tireless fondness for striking heroic poses. Hagrid muttered, If you say he's a scholar, I don't believe it. If you say he's a con man, I'm convinced. It's hard to find someone for defense against the dark arts. People think the job's unlucky. Unlucky? Hermione repeated. Rogge's voice was low. The defense against the dark arts post at this school is cursed. No one can hold it for more than a year. A curse? Hermione's eyes widened. That's terrible. Sometimes it's only minor injuries, Rogge said, but sometimes it can mean death. Tragic fates have a habit of finding that post. Hermione frowned. That could be coincidence. We can't jump to conclusions. All right, check the coop first. Hagrid counted the birds with a frown. 1, 2, 7. The remaining chickens were alive. That surprised him. That's odd. The killer has stopped. These ones are fine. Hermione walked the perimeter of the coop, finding only scattered feathers and no footprints. Hagrid, these are all hens, aren't they? Rogge asked. Hagrid blinked. Yes, now that you say it, only the roosters died. Rogge's face hardened. It seemed the attacker had targeted roosters only. Hermione's mind leapt. Could the Chamber of Secrets have anything to do with this? The idea struck her like a bell. She thanked them and dashed back toward the castle, determined to search the library. Only Hagrid and Rogge remained at the edge of the forest. Rogge pulled a stack of old files and photographs from his pocket and handed them to Hagrid. As Hagrid looked, his brow tightened and his face darkened. Anger rose and overflowed. You're accusing me? Hagrid roared. Myrtle wasn't killed by me. I didn't open the chamber. Rogge said nothing but flicked his wand in a small, sharp gesture that made Hagrid's tongue go still for a moment. A tongue-tying charm, used not cruelly, but to stop him from shouting. He pointed at the umbrella, gesturing Hagrid to set it down. Calm down. I'm not a fool, Hagrid. You've been the gamekeeper for years with no trouble. I don't think you opened the chamber deliberately. Hagrid's shoulders drooped a little. Rogge slid a file across the hooded table. Look at this. Tom Riddle's name appears here. Did he report you to the school? Hagrid's face paled. Yes, it was him, he said hoarsely. Tom, he said I did it. He lied and I was expelled. They took my wand. He groped for words. I'd never even seen Myrtle. If Dumbledore hadn't stood up for me, the Ministry would have taken more than my wand. After Tom became Voldemort, people stopped looking back, Rogge said. The Ministry never reinvestigated, and his trophies are still in the castle. Hagrid's fists clenched. Rogge's expression turned cold and hard. You keep dangerous creatures, he said bluntly. Maybe you think they're harmless, but a school is full of young, underage witches and wizards. You live at Hogwarts. You should temper your giant habits with wizard sense." Hagrid opened his mouth. "But Tom, he was so good. Prefect, head boy. Who'd suspect him?" Rogge's voice was clipped. "He later became Lord Voldemort. He was good at manipulating people." Hagrid stared, confused and ashamed, the color draining from his face. Rogge softened his tone a fraction. "If the truth comes out someday, would you be willing to be a witness?" "A witness?" Hagrid echoed, bewildered. He looked at Rogge as if that had never occurred to him. Rogge spun Hagrid's pink umbrella between his hands and then tossed it back to the giant. "An umbrella won't protect you against that kind of enemy." He let the words hang. If Tom Riddle's diary were merely destroyed by a basilisk fang, that would be too neat an ending, too convenient for Tom. Rogge's real thought, spoken only in the quiet between them, was harsher. If it came to it, he'd prefer to burn such evil in the open, even with fiend fire, before the Wizengamot, than let it persist. Chapter 158, Malfoy's Changes. Rooster! Rooster! Hermione went to the library every day, chasing that clue, which also slowed down her signature campaign. Her instincts were right. A rooster's crow was a natural enemy of a basilisk. If a basilisk heard a rooster crow, even a centuries-old basilisk would die on the spot. But she needed the books to prove it, and Rogge kept quiet. He had thought it over and decided not to spoil the mystery yet. He wanted to let Hermione stay busy so the campaign wouldn't advance too quickly. During the club meeting on Sunday afternoon, Malfoy was making ridiculous noises. "Oh!" He stretched his neck and elongated his voice like someone imitating a werewolf. Seeing Rogge enter, he called out, excited, "Rogge, it's a pity you missed Defense Against the Dark Arts. I really like Lockhart. There's no better professor." "Isn't it just become a performance class?" Rogge smiled. The class had turned into a complete farce. "Yes, Lockhart and Kettleburn set up a drama club. Guess who's in it? Harry and Ron. I can't wait for Defense Against the Dark Arts now. They stage a new story every time." Malfoy mimicked Harry, tiptoeing exaggeratedly. The professor told him to play a werewolf. He obediently went out and pretended to see the full moon. Malfoy tugged at his robes and howled theatrically. Everyone had seen Harry's performance, but Malfoy's imitation had its own special venom. The group laughed and applauded. "Oh, Professor, I'll kill you!" Malfoy flourished his hands, then turned and made a ridiculous face at everyone. Then the heroic Lockhart pounces and pins Harry to the floor, one hand on him, the other with a wand at his throat, and Harry cries out tragically, "Oh, oh!" They all burst out laughing. Rogge couldn't help but chuckle. Lockhart might as well be an actor. "I heard Lockhart is rehearsing a Christmas play," Nott offered. "Yes, Harry's the female lead. I've already packed my camera. I can't wait to take pictures of Harry in a dress," Malfoy purred, imagining selling the scandalous photos to the Daily Prophet. A headline like "Savior Harry in Tragic Romance" would sell papers by the cartload. "So who's directing?" Rogge asked. "Professor Lockhart. And the villain?" "Snape." "Who?" Rogge raised his voice in disbelief. "Snape as villain in Lockhart's play?" "We didn't believe it either," Malfoy continued, "but Dean's actually playing the Vampire Queen. My goodness, that will be something." Hermione walked in, yawning and carrying a stack of books. She looked like she'd been up all night researching again. "Since everyone's here, I'll arrange the next activity. Challenging an acromantula," Rogge announced. "An acromantula?" Eyes widened. Fighting one of those was dangerous. Only Malfoy swaggered. He'd already had a tussle with one, in his telling, and thought he'd won. "We'll be dealing with a healthy acromantula," Rogge reminded them. "Not a blind one. This is a big specimen with full vision all around." "President, isn't that too dangerous? We're only second years," Anthony warned. "If anything happens, you could be expelled." "No one will find us. With me there, I guarantee nothing will go wrong." Rogge thought about the basilisk he'd rather face. An acromantula was nothing by comparison. "Don't panic. This won't be a one-on-one. It's about teamwork." "You mean we'll fight a spider together?" Relief swept the room. "For now, just to get you used to an acromantula's attack rhythm. By the end of the year, I expect many of you will be able to handle one alone. The strongest will even get to see the Forbidden Forest." "Really? That'll be me." Daphne stepped forward first and waved her wand to bring the wooden crate over. Inside was the usual blind spider they'd used in club practice. Daphne's face fell. Rogge, where's the healthy one? I'll bring it next week. We'll use this one for practice today. I'll teach you the spell, Arania Exumai. Rogge demonstrated the wand movement and pronunciation. Pronunciation matters. In Latin, Arania is spider, and Exumai means disperse. Speak clearly. Don't panic when you face a big one. He opened the crate and had everyone stand behind him. He lifted the leg locker curse off the spider, and it lunged at him, full of fury. Arania Exumai! Rogge drew a strong X in the air, and the pouncing creature froze, then scrambled toward a corner and pressed itself into a nook as if trying to disappear. Everyone's faces lit up. They began to chant the spell, copying Rogge. He moved among them, correcting pronunciation and movement. The Ravenclaw Magical Society's members were already excellent for their year. They picked up the new charm quickly. The poor spider was chased around by their dispersal spells. Malfoy motioned to Nott to stand opposite him, and the two began to taunt the blind acromantula, herding it like sheep and making it scuttle back and forth. Anthony and Terry joined in, and the four of them kept racking up charms to drive it away. They treated it like a new plaything, laughing. In the end, the spider was exhausted, barely moving. Malfoy, stop tormenting it, Hermione snapped. All right, Vice President, we'll stop, Malfoy said with a sheepish chuckle, realizing it had gone too far. Hermione remained unconvinced. If she hadn't been watching, he would have kept at it. Malfoy, be quicker next time, Rogge scolded. Playing with an enemy wastes time and creates danger. A true wizard learns to kill with a single clean blow, no hesitation. We must respect life, and killing decisively is a form of respect. We cannot, through pride, allow an enemy to linger, Rogge added quietly, thinking of how many villains had survived through needless teasing and later caused trouble. I understand, Rogge. Malfoy nodded. I'm sorry, Hermione. I shouldn't have treated it like a toy. You should apologize to the spider, Hermione said, not entirely forgiving. I was part of it too. Let's apologize together. Nott, Anthony, and Terry quickly stepped forward to show remorse. All right, you may perform the final rites, Rogge said, handing the dagger to Malfoy. Malfoy ended the acromantula's suffering and, with a practiced hand, cut it open. Rogge, you need to be stricter as president, Hermione told him after they dispersed. I accept your criticism. Rogge nodded seriously. I should have stopped them sooner. It's thanks to you they didn't get reckless. Ravenclaw Magical Society is lucky to have you as vice president. It's not that good, Hermione murmured, blushing and looking down. Rogge thought about how they'd all come from different houses with different backgrounds. It wasn't easy to get everyone to cooperate. He was grateful Nott had intervened earlier, or Malfoy might have picked a fight with Hermione. Hermione, you should rest more, Rogge said, concerned. I know. Hermione waved him off. By the way, did you notice someone else in the club has been reading all the Muggle books? Rogge asked. What? Who? Hermione looked up. Aside from her, who else was interested in Muggle texts? She'd been too busy with library research to read the new volumes Rogge bought. It's Malfoy, Rogge said with a smile. He was thrilled when he realized you didn't know about hemoglobin. You know him. He loves nothing more than beating Miss Granger at knowledge, Malfoy taunted. Hermione pooted at the thought of losing to Malfoy, then looked at Rogge and said softly, I'm sorry, I was too hasty. It's not really your fault. Malfoy's always been raised in the wizarding world. Some things take time. Changes were happening slowly, like this year's Quidditch match. Students from other houses had come to support Slytherin. Susan, Anthony, and Terry now found themselves oddities in their houses, waving Slytherin banners with a glowing snake on them. The stands hummed. Both teams rode out to the pitch, old rivals in a new light. All of Slytherin flew Nimbus 2000s. When your father is rich, he can buy a team's advantage. The rich relied on equipment, the less wealthy on raw skill. The principle held even in the wizarding world. The commentator, Li Qiaodan, clearly disliked Slytherin and had no intention of flattering them, but with distinguished guests in the stands, he kept his remarks measured. Among the Slytherin spectators were two notable guests. Ludo Bagman, the famed former beater, and now head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports at the Ministry, and Hassan Mustafa, chairman of the International Quidditch Federation. They'd come to Hogwarts because Britain was hosting the next Quidditch World Cup. Fudge had been invited but bailed at the last minute. Lucius Malfoy had brought them to the Slytherin stand. Dean Snape sat stiffly next to them, wondering why such prominent figures had come to watch a school match. He suspected it wasn't just for a single student's performance. 7 Nimbus 2000s against 1. This match is unbalanced, Hassan observed, studying the teams. The match seemed decided at a glance. The chairman's right. Gryffindor's only path to victory is catching the snitch quickly, Ludo said. You mean Potter? Hassan nodded. Exactly. Harry must shake off Slytherin's seeker and grab the snitch fast. That won't be easy. Lucius, what do you think? Hassan asked, looking to Draco's father. Gryffindor's at a clear disadvantage, Lucius admitted smoothly, but Quidditch is also about skill and tactics. If the players are good enough, anything can happen. He watched his son Draco with a father's intensity, hoping Draco would not disappoint in front of such guests. On the field, Marcus and Wood shook hands, while Madame Hooch warned them against fouling. Pay attention. Special guests are watching. Give your best performance, she said gravely. Special guests? Marcus and Wood exchanged puzzled looks but obeyed Madame Hooch's tone. At her whistle, all 14 players shot into the air. Harry climbed higher than anyone, squinting as he searched for the snitch. Marcus, mark Harry. You execute the plan, Malfoy said, gripping his broom and shooting upwards like an arrow. St. Potter, let's see who finds the snitch first. No answer came from Harry. At that moment, a black bludger flew straight at him. He barely dodged. George tackled it with his bat and sent it away, but something was wrong. The bludger's trajectory was off. Ludo frowned. That bludger isn't acting naturally, he said. That boy reacts very quickly, Hassan remarked. He could be a professional seeker one day. Slytherin exploited their Nimbus 2000 speed, and within minutes they had a perfect offensive rhythm. 3 chasers formed a tight inverted triangle while 2 beaters provided cover. Gryffindor couldn't gain control of the quaffle. If they caught it, Slytherin snatched it back with superior speed and counterattacked. Harry, you okay? George called, batting the bludger away from his friend, only to see it come right back toward Harry. Slytherin leads, 40-0, Li Qiaodan reported, voice flat. How? Harry and George were stunned. The spectators looked at the pitch in alarm as the Slytherins ran up the score. Malfoy dodged a bludger that seemed to turn mid-flight and grinned at Harry. Give up. Even if you catch the snitch, you won't win. Our hard power is too big, he shouted. 50-0. Li Qiaodan's voice trembled. In Gryffindor's stands, faces fell. The margin was already crushing. Very professional, Ludo laughed. To him, it looked like a pro team mocking a student squad. It's not just the brooms, he added. Tactics and cohesion matter. I agree, Hassan said. No amount of individual skill can replace teamwork. Slytherin's discipline and coordination kept pressing. The score jumped. 120-0. Li Qiaodan's voice became almost inaudible. That boy's running out of time, Hassan said, watching Harry. George and Fred kept batting bludgers back at the Slytherins, but the bludgers always seemed to return to Harry, slithering around him like missiles. You're cheating, George yelled. Do we need to? Malfoy sneered. Who are you to tell us what's fair? Harry, run! George shouted, hearing the whine of a bludger. Harry accelerated and shot to the other end of the pitch, diving and spinning, but a bludger stuck to him like glue. Malfoy trailed him, intent on denying him any chance at the snitch. Something's wrong, Lucius whispered to Snape. Both of them realized the bludger's behavior was unnatural. Time out! We need a timeout, George signaled to Wood. He and Fred had noticed the bludger's abnormality. Madame Hooch blew her whistle. The match was paused and the scoreboard frozen at 130-0, Gryffindor in possession of the quaffle. Where did those two go? Wood snapped at the twins. Angelina had a shot moments ago, but the bludger stopped her. That was a chance we fought hard for. We were above her, dealing with another bludger aimed at Harry, Fred said. What? That bludger was tampered with, not normal, George insisted. But we locked the bludgers in Madame Hooch's office after practice last night, Wood protested. In the stands, Hermione whispered to Hagrid, someone put a spell on that bludger. It's too targeted to be natural. Who'd do such a thing? Hagrid grumbled, scanning the crowd with his binoculars. Lucius and Snape wore grim expressions, but their worries differed. Lucius wanted his son to win, and to win cleanly, before such important guests. Snape was more suspicious about how the match was being manipulated. The rain intensified, and the two teams fell silent, talking strategy beneath the downpour. A Quidditch match doesn't end by score alone, but when a seeker catches the golden snitch. If neither seeker finds it, the game can go on forever. The longest recorded match had lasted 6 months. Everyone stayed despite the rain. Tradition, stubbornness, curiosity. But they all hoped the seekers would finish it soon and not leave them standing in the storm. "Malfoy, we're winning today, no doubt," Marcus said confidently from the Slytherin line. "It's only 130 now. Score 2 quick goals," Malfoy replied curtly, following Rogge's instructions to plan around whoever caught the snitch. "No need. Our speed will crush them. You mark Potter. We'll teach Gryffindor a lesson." The Slytherins laughed, thinking Draco too cocky. "Don't worry. We'll win." Madam Hooch blew her whistle, and the game resumed. Players struck through the rain like fish through water. Hassan declined Lucius's suggestion to return to the castle. He wanted to see if Harry could turn the tide. Harry climbed higher and higher, the bludger howling closer. Rain stung his glasses. To avoid the bludger's attack, he had to hang upside down, rainwater streaming into his nose. A figure tracked him relentlessly. "Malfoy?" Harry muttered in annoyance. Draco was glued to him. The bludger hadn't changed course yet, so Harry used the moment to take in the field. Oliver Wood had abandoned his keeper position, and, hidden by the heavy rain, everyone from Gryffindor launched a counterattack on Slytherin. They shielded their chasers with their bodies and tried to break Slytherin's momentum. Below, Li Qiaodan called out, "Goal! 130-10. Gryffindor turns it around." In the stands, Rogge didn't look convinced. Malfoy shouted to his teammates, and Harry saw the golden snitch suddenly circling just behind Draco's head. Malfoy was too busy berating his team to notice. Harry froze, holding his breath. If Malfoy turned, he might see the snitch. Thud! The bludger crashed into Harry's forearm. Pain like lightning seared through him. He heard the sickening crack of bone. Blood pooled beneath the skin, and a dark bruise spread fast. The blow nearly knocked him from his broom. Harry gripped the handle with his left hand, dizzy, sweat slick along his back. He didn't cry out, only gritted his teeth. His right arm went numb and hung uselessly. Malfoy's shouting worked. Marcus forced Draco to shut up and led his teammates in a renewed assault on Gryffindor. The bludger re-angled through the rain, and this time streaked toward Harry's face. With a snitch ahead and a bludger behind, Harry had only one choice: go for Malfoy and the snitch. Draco turned and saw Harry bearing down. "You're insane. That's the golden snitch," he shouted and met Harry head-on, determined that if he fell, he wouldn't let Potter take it. The snitch darted, then bolted from between them. They missed one another in midair and spun after it. Draco's speed pulled ahead, and he hulled into Harry, the impact sending fresh jolts of pain through his broken arm and slowing him. "Scarhead, you can't catch me," Malfoy taunted, pushing Harry off and sprinting after the snitch. The bludger that had injured Harry followed mercilessly. Dobby's handiwork stuck to Harry like a shadow. Harry clenched his teeth, pushed through the needle-like rain, and chased with everything he had. He would not lose to Malfoy. The two seekers and their golden quarry cut across the pitch, white streaks of water trailing them. Rogge watched, a little awed. The snitch darted, paused, darted again, almost as if it had a mind of its own. The bludger, however, stayed fixed on Harry. "It flees, he chases, it cannot escape," Rogge muttered. Li Qiaodan called the next score, 140-10. The Slytherins were mounting an unstoppable lead. The two seekers streaked past the stands, broom tops throwing up sheets of water. Lucius smoothed his expression into a satisfied smile. Ludo Bagman nudged Snape. "Harry looks hurt," he said. "Injured," Malfoy bristled, less concerned for Potter than eager for praise. Riding in Draco's slipstream saved Harry some energy. The two seekers pushed harder, and the bludger fell behind. 150-10, Li Qiaodan announced, then 160-10. The storm began to ease. The players were visible again. "Go, Harry! You can do it!" Ron and the Patils shouted. Harry clung to the broom with his left hand and edged away from Malfoy's right side. Draco darted to block him, but in doing so, he left his left flank exposed. Harry seized the gap, making a beautiful cross through the rain as the snitch turned. Malfoy slammed into him. 170 to 10, Li Qiaodun intoned, and the Slytherins erupted. Victory for Slytherin now seemed certain. At most, Gryffindor could hope for a tie. Ludo and Hassan both commented on the high score and Slytherin's dominance while watching the two seekers shoulder to shoulder through the softening rain. The bludger was no longer a real threat. They lunged, hands nearly touching the snitch at the same instant. For a breathless moment, everything froze. The rain, the crowd, the world. Then Rogge clapped once. At that same instant, Watson lobbed the quaffle into Gryffindor's goal. The score was sealed, 170 to 10. Even if Harry caught the snitch, Gryffindor could not win. The Slytherins cheered and high-fived. Draco hovered there with an empty hand. Harry, clinging to the broom with his legs alone, dropped from the sky and hit the mud hard, soaked to the bone. His right arm lolled at a wrong angle. Waves of agony pulsed through it. "Aha! I caught the golden snitch!" Harry croaked, raising his uninjured hand. Cheers and applause rose, misunderstood, because the scoreboard now read 170 to 160 once the snitch's 150 points were added to Gryffindor's 10. They had won the snitch but lost the match. "An exceptional seeker," Ludo said, eyes bright. "Winning or losing matters, but so does character and spirit. Professor Snape, where is Professor McGonagall? I'd like to speak to Harry about trying out for a professional team." Snape looked nonplussed. Lucius's grip on his cane tightened. "If not for weak teammates, he might have won," Lucius muttered. "Draco played well too," Ludo continued, eager to flatter. "He showed leadership. If you were to groom him professionally, I'd suggest he try other positions." Ludo patted Draco on the shoulder. Draco glowed at the praise. He wasn't fit to be a seeker, the man hinted, but he was talented overall. Harry, Ludo thought, had the reaction time, speed, and instinct a seeker needs. And luck, too. Even half disabled by the bludger, he still caught the snitch. If Slytherin hadn't had those 7 Nimbus 2000s, but there are no ifs, you match equipment to success. Most of all, Ludo saw publicity in history. The return of the golden snitch would be a spectacle. Rogge claims he found a living golden snitch, Hassan told the gathered nobles. If it can be presented at the next Quidditch World Cup, it will be a momentous restoration for the sport. Lucius's eyes lit, then clouded with the weight of the thought. Ludo waxed poetic about fireworks, cheering wizards, and Quidditch's revived glory, until Professor Snape quietly rose and said, "He's in the stands," cutting him off. Ludo stuttered, the pause making the flattery awkward. When Harry came to, a small crowd was around him. Lockhart's white-toothed grin was too close. "Don't worry, Harry, I'll mend you right away," Lockhart announced, reaching for his wand. Harry recoiled. "No, Professor Lockhart, please." He could still hear camera shutters in his head from earlier. "Lie still," Lockhart insisted, wand already out. "There's a simple spell. Oh, this will be perfect. You're needed for the Christmas play. You can't go to pieces now." Wood, muddy and furious, stepped up. Why isn't he being taken to the hospital wing? That catch was brilliant. "Stand back." Lockhart rolled his emerald robe and began to wave his wand. Harry's heart sank. The magic prickled from shoulder to fingertips, a hollowing sensation like something draining out. He averted his eyes and clenched them shut. People around him gasped. Colin broke into a frenzy of pictures. When he opened his eyes, Harry's arm felt different, numb, strangely light. Malfoy leaned in with a smirk. "How did you turn into a floppy bit of meat?" he mocked. "Huh?" Harry's worst fear peaked. His arm was useless in every way. Draco crouched, took the limp arm in his hand, and shook his head. What a pity. The Chosen One can't even save his team. "Malfoy," Wood snapped. "Did I say something wrong?" Draco sneered. "I knew Potter would get the snitch. Marcus and I planned it. Tie up your keeper, while my team racked up a 150-point lead." "What about the bludger?" George and Fred were wrestling a strapping, struggling bludger into a box. "We won fair and square. If you think otherwise, we'll take it to the headmaster." "You're sore losers." Fred shot back. "You used Nimbus 2000s. Your lot never win, honestly." "Humph. Your father, Arthur?" "Save the excuses. There's no rule against Nimbus 2000s. If you can't handle it, blame yourselves," Malfoy said, insolent. The Gryffindors fizzed with anger, itching to sock him. Lucius called Draco over. He waved at the other side of the stands, proud as anything. "Father, We won, Draco boasted. I saw, Lucius said, drawing his son closer with a meaningful look. That large one is Ludo Bagman, director of sports. The other is Hassan Mustafa, chairman of the International Quidditch Federation. Don't you want to go pro? This is a rare chance. They're here about the golden snitch, Lucius explained, when Draco blinked in confusion. Rogge discovered a living snitch. They want to make it the World Cup's opening attraction. Draco's chest swelled. I thought they were after Harry, he admitted. Lucius smoothed his robes. That too, but they took notice of your performance. This could be very good for your future. Consider other positions. Seeker is flashy, but Hogwarts already has Harry Potter in that role. Remember, people remember winners, not runners-up. Draco touched the Magic Club badge on his chest and nodded. I'll think about it. Good. Seize the opportunity. Draco took a few brisk steps toward the high-ranking visitors. Rogge looked him over and nodded. The strategy worked. If Marcus hadn't slipped, it would have been even easier. Draco followed, pride and ambition battling with the ache of a game half won. Chapter 160. Who Wants a Medal? Hogwarts had no suitable reception room. Snape's office? No, everybody knew that was a dungeon. Who, besides Professor Snape, would invite guests there? Roger, this is Mr. Hassan Mustafa, chairman of the International Quidditch Federation, someone said. Hello, welcome to our school. Roger instantly slipped into tour guide mode, cheerfully showing them around. Faced with such an enthusiastic young wizard, and since both visitors had things to ask him about, they had no choice but to follow Roger through the castle. This castle is 1,000 years old and has produced countless famous witches and wizards, Roger said as he led them up a spiral staircase. Our transfiguration professor is Professor McGonagall. She's strict with students but cares for them, and she herself is an animagus, one of the recognized transfiguration masters in the wizarding world. That cold professor you've already met is my dean, Professor Snape, Roger continued. Precision and perfection might as well be his only words. Believe me, he's the most impossible presence in the school. Besides a strong faculty, we also have excellent facilities. The library's collection is unparalleled. If you're willing to study, you can find any knowledge you want. Ludo wiped his forehead now and then, thinking, this young man talks too much. Many graduates from here become the backbone of the magical world, Roger went on. There's the famous magizoologist Newt Scamander, ignore that he was expelled, and of course our headmaster, the great Albus Dumbledore. Although we don't teach the dark arts, don't underestimate our research into defense against the dark arts, Roger began. Cough, cough. Ludo interrupted with a quick cough, reminding Roger not to bring up certain topics. However, we do have our shortcomings. Shortcomings? Hassan looked puzzled. Hogwarts was supposed to be exemplary in every way. How could it have shortcomings? Roger, you're too modest. I don't think any school in the wizarding world compares to Hogwarts, Hassan said with a smile. I'd heard Hogwarts didn't rank highly, but after your tour, I can see that rankings don't tell the whole story. Mr. Chairman, please come to our trophy room, Roger said, motioning for Malfoy to lead the way. Snape introduced the two visitors and then departed. He still didn't know why they had come looking for him. Wow, so many trophies, Hassan exclaimed when they entered. We've won a lot at international magical competitions, but for Quidditch, we mostly have internal trophies, Roger explained as they looked at the dense displays. Our pitch has seen countless thrilling matches. House competitions are fierce, producing generations of excellent players, like Draco. Roger patted Draco on the shoulder. He thought, if I don't push my own club members, who will? But they have too few opportunities for external exposure, Roger continued. Major teams only scout in Europe and don't come here. Even talented students don't get the chance to show what they can do. Recently, the ministry has lifted the ban on magic carpets. If we don't cultivate local talent, British Quidditch might be replaced by other flying sports, Roger said earnestly. Hassan and Ludo exchanged glances. Is this a Slytherin? They wondered. Professional teams are few, competition is fierce, and most players have long careers. Unregistered teams can't participate in official competitions. Players don't only need talent, they also need sponsorship to try out. Why don't major teams bother with Hogwarts? Because Dumbledore hasn't donated a single nut, Roger said wryly. Roger, You make a good point. I'm sure Director Ludo will take notice and work to create more opportunities for the students, Hassan promised. Don't worry, Chairman. Today's match was eye-opening. Hogwarts does have many excellent players, Ludo said, flashing a smile. He suspected Roger's motives. Typical Slytherin, always angling for something. I'm sure the major teams will hear about it. They won't miss any talent. Ludo thought, if we show goodwill, shouldn't the golden snitch be given to the International Quidditch Federation? He didn't say it aloud, of course. He wanted to entice rather than demand. Malfoy clenched his fist in excitement. Through Roger's careful guidance, he saw a real chance. He thought of his father's advice and hesitated. Keep competing against Harry, or switch to a position that would better showcase him. We ran into Newt a little while ago, Ludo said. He's still traveling, finding homes for magical creatures. Admirable work. Mr. Newt loves them. Professor Kettleburn is retiring soon. Maybe Newt will come teach here. Roger couldn't help but grumble about Dumbledore for letting Hagrid be a professor. Cough. Roger, we heard from Newt that you found golden snitch eggs. Have they hatched? Ludo asked, getting straight to the point. They're protected by ancient magic and haven't been unsealed yet, Roger said with a smile. He'd suspected this was why they'd come. Is that so? What a pity, Ludo replied, looking disappointed. Roger, Britain is about to host the Quidditch World Cup. We need to show the world Britain's attitude toward its history. What does that have to do with the golden snitch? Roger feigned ignorance. You might not know this, but I don't like Quidditch. The golden snitch's extinction is directly related to Quidditch's history, Ludo said. I believe Hogwarts students are kind, willing to help us get the golden snitch back in the skies. If they can fly again, perhaps you could be awarded the Order of Merlin, Ludo offered plainly. The Order of Merlin, Malfoy blurted. That would be an incredible honor. I understand you need those eggs, Roger said slowly, but kindness, perhaps? You're trying to pull the wool over my eyes, said Ludo skeptically. Roger, don't worry. We'll mobilize global resources to unseal the magic. We'll personally oversee their breeding. Ludo sounded confident. Who could refuse a promise of the Order of Merlin? Then they'd be miserable, Roger blurted out. Excuse me? Ludo blinked. What did you say? They're wild birds. They should soar free, not become wizard mascots, Roger said, voice steady. We already drove them to extinction once. Are we going to enslave them now? Roger's words made them uncomfortable. Ludo flushed. You've been keeping that nest of eggs this whole time. Aren't you responsible for them? They could reappear, but you don't have the power to help them if you don't unseal them. No, Roger replied. As long as they remain sealed, they aren't extinct. There's still hope. But once unsealed, he shook his head. The golden snitch has been gone for hundreds of years. What if they hatch but can't adapt to the current world? Who can guarantee they'll survive? Ludo responded hotly. We are wizards. We have the best magical creature experts. We have a duty to save the species. Roger listened calmly. I don't deny the importance of saving them, but there's only one chance. Why rush? If the conditions are right, I will unseal them myself. Newt wanted a sanctuary. Ludo and Hassan talked big about correcting past wrongs, but offered little action. Hassan stepped forward to mediate. Roger's concerns are reasonable and need careful consideration. We won't bother you more today. Are you just going to let them walk away? Malfoy asked, puzzled. I thought you were going to demand conditions. If they come once, they'll come again. After the snitches hatch, they'll seek me out. Roger sounded confident. If anyone was going to be a steward, it would be someone who respected their freedom. Malfoy sighed. His tryout chance probably slipped away. If you want to go pro, train hard. Maybe Hogwarts could even field a team for the next World Cup, Roger encouraged. What? We could be in the World Cup? Malfoy's eyes widened in disbelief. Does Headmaster Dumbledore have the authority and influence? Yes. Is the golden snitch that important to Quidditch? Very important. Could the headmaster plus the snitch get us a professional team? Well, we might have to add a little money, Roger hedged. Money? Malfoy laughed in disbelief. Dumbledore's prestige alone could be a game changer. If the golden snitch returned under Hogwarts' care, the glory to British wizarding sport would be immense. Malfoy was impressed by Roger's strategy. Instead of selling the snitch for a medal, create the conditions for Hogwarts to join the professional ranks. As for Ludo, he had meant to seek out the boy who lived and ask if Harry would try out for a professional team, but Roger had put up a firm, uncomfortable front. Seeing that, Ludo and Chairman Hassan left. Late that night, Roger was roused by Snape. Another petrification had occurred at the school. The victim was a small boy, Colin. "Professor, can't Gryffindor students just settle down at night?" Roger yawned. "Couldn't they just not wander around?" "They should have huge point deductions to remember," Snape agreed. "But Roger, why are you up at this hour?" Roger asked, puzzled. "I don't have a habit of roaming at night." "The headmaster has questions for you," Snape said pointedly. Instead of heading straight to the hospital wing, he led Roger toward the dungeons. Roger muttered, "Might as well brew the Mandrake restorative draught." He rubbed his eyes. They had brewed 5 doses earlier, just in case. Although he hoped no one would need them, the situation looked bleak. No one knew when the next attack would come. In the hospital wing, Colin lay stiff as a statue, camera clutched in his hands. The negatives had been removed. Dumbledore held the ruined film. "Madame Pomfrey, this is the Mandrake restorative draught," Roger said, handing over the fresh potion. Pomfrey accepted it with relief. "Luckily, Albus happened to come downstairs for hot coffee. Otherwise," she trailed off, shuddering. Dumbledore examined the camera, then looked grave. "The negatives are melted," he said. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened again. Thanks to your Mandrake, Colin can tell us what happened," Dumbledore continued. Roger picked up his own battered camera and examined it, everything inside scorched. "Principal, there can't be 2 heirs, can there?" he asked. Everyone present had heard of the events 50 years ago. Hagrid had probably also told Dumbledore about dead chickens. They exchanged glances, each suspecting the same dark cause. But Dumbledore looked puzzled. Tom Riddle was dead, his soul gone. He'd searched the school and found no trace. If Tom had a way to conceal himself now, then Hogwarts was no longer safe. "No," Dumbledore said firmly. "There is only one heir." "Then he disguised himself as a student and snuck in," Roger said calmly. The thought sent chills through those assembled. What magic could let someone change so completely, right under their noses? "Or disguised as a professor," Snape added grimly. "Like Lockhart, our new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. He's odd and dangerously incompetent." "For the student's safety, I suggest expelling him," Snape said. "I will take on the Defense Against the Dark Arts post myself." Dumbledore waved him down. "Severus, we cannot expel anyone without concrete evidence. Transformations and long disguises are not impossible. Transfiguration can be complex and subtle, yet to pull it off undetected by Dumbledore would be extraordinary." Roger's words, however, made Dumbledore consider another possibility. Perhaps the old Tom Riddle was not the one acting. At that moment, Colin slowly came around. He could blink one eye, at least. Otherwise, he would have become the school's second nearly headless Nick. He looked terrified, shaking as he tried to speak. "Help! Help!" he cried, then calmed with Pomfrey and McGonagall comforting him. Harry, sitting in the ward, listened from the side. If Colin had been unpetrified, he knew what the boy had seen. "A snake! A giant green snake!" Colin trembled. At least 20 feet long, covered in scales, hissing the whole time. He caught his breath, as if reliving it. "I'd never seen anything like it, so I raised my camera to take a picture. Then it turned its head and looked straight at me." Roger smiled a little from the side, typical Gryffindor. Not the first to run. Brave or foolish, it was hard to tell. The sound of Colin's camera must have startled the creature. It didn't eat him, though. It had been stopped. It must have been the headmaster who saved him, Roger thought. Who would come downstairs for hot coffee in the middle of the night, if not Dumbledore? The eyes were yellow, like lanterns, glowing evil. It had 2 long fangs, like tusks, and it looked as if it wanted to swallow me whole. Colin shivered. "You were brave, Colin," Dumbledore said gently. "Rest now. We will protect every student." Outside the ward, Dumbledore asked Roger for his opinion. "Colin has Lockhart's talent for dramatics," Roger said carefully. "But that giant snake, its appearance and timing are strange." Roger still didn't know that Ginny had thrown a diary into the girls' lavatory and that Harry and Ron had found it. To anyone who'd seen Harry in the ward, the person who opened the chamber was becoming obvious. "If I recall correctly, that sounds like a basilisk," Roger added. Professor Quirrell mentioned one in class last year. Quirrell? The name made the others look at one another. Professor Quirrell had been possessed by Lord Voldemort. Could Voldemort be at work again? If the heir had opened the chamber and released a basilisk, all the pieces might fit. No, he hasn't returned, Dumbledore said, shaking his head. He dismissed that possibility. Roger hesitated, then offered another thought. Maybe it's remote control, some connection used to control someone inside the school to do the work. So far, the attacks, Madame Norris and Colin, happened in deserted places. Especially tonight, it suggests the culprit sneaks out only at night. Violating curfew? Snape glanced at McGonagall. Professor, your house has the most curfew offenders. Severus, you can't leap to conclusions without evidence, McGonagall snapped. Dumbledore waved his hand, quieting them. Roger's deductions had brought them to a grim conclusion. Someone in the school was being controlled, used to carry out the heir's will. The question now was not whether the danger existed, but where it would strike next.